Welcome all of our guests. Call the meeting to order. Tonight, if you will indulge on this, Ms. Pastor Rita Richardson will do our invocation. Pastor Rita, before you get started, I think it would be appropriate if we all stand and let's take a moment to remember Senator Greg Standridge, who passed away today. It's a great loss to our community.
Let us pray. Lord, first of all, we remember a special person, Senator Standridge. We pray for his family and those who knew him so well. We appreciate the contributions that he made for our area. Lord, during this season of Thanksgiving, we pause and say, thank you for this community. We thank you for all the blessings that we have here in the city. We thank you for our city leaders who willingly work many long hours on behalf of our city and its residents. Help them to lead and govern with integrity. I pray for our mayor, our city council, department heads, police, fire, emergency personnel, and others who work in various levels of city government. We give thanks for their dedication and commitment to this community. Lord, grant them all contentment in their work and peace in their lives. Lord, give our city leaders wisdom as they make decisions on the various issues that come before them, and guide them in their work daily as they consider the needs of the city and its residents. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. And while we're standing, would you please join us in pledging allegiance to our flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all, and be seated, please. Ms. Collins, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Brown.
Here.
Thank you. Ms. Caruth.
Present.
Mr. George.
Here.
Ms. Harris.
Here.
Mr. Sims.
Here.
Mr. Tripp.
Present.
Mr. Wiley.
Here.
Mr. Westcott.
Here.
We have a quorum.
The quorum has been declared. Council, you should have been provided minutes of our recent meetings in your packages. Are there any corrections? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Motion. Second.
Motion to approve, Mr. Westcott, second, Mr. Sims. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Mr. McCoy, would you provide us with a financial report?
Mayor and Council, finance report for October. General fund revenues were $1,417,882 for October, at 8.4% above our projections. Tax receipts were $782,740. Franchise fees and permits $389,156. Expenditures were $961,610, 3.83% below projection. More $859,294 more receipted than expended. Street fund revenues were $164,425, 2.01% below projections. Of that, sales tax receipts were $587,352. The half-cent road tax, $51,687. Expenditures were $129,556, 3% above year-to-date projections. Sales tax improvements were $10,136 for drainage. There's no capital improvements. Economic development, $35,655, $31,728 was the new sales tax, $3,927 was interest. Expenditures were $487,555 for the Arkansas Valley Alliance and Weir Road improvement. Capital assets, revenues were $87,127, $85,899 was the new sales tax, $1,133 was interest. Expenditures were $439,938 for City Corp, the fire station, police department, Parks and Rec. Any questions? Thank you.
No questions. Thank you, Mr. McCoy. I guess that brings it down to the mayor's report. Kevin with Polk County Library asked to come back and advise us of another item coming up.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. There's a couple of items that's coming up in the next few weeks at the library. On Thursday, November 30th, we will be having our annual Deck the Halls from 4 until 6 p.m. We're inviting the public to come and help decorate our Christmas tree. There'll be refreshments there. We will also be having live cello music provided by Kristen Smith. Then on Thursday, December the 14th, Santa will be coming to the library. First, we will be having a special story time at 4:30 for the children, and Santa will be arriving at 5 o'clock, and he'll be available until 7 for pictures and visit with the children. So that's all I have for tonight, unless there's any questions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Massey. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. I was waiting on, thought we would have some business from City Corp tonight. I'm waiting to hear if he's on his way. If y'all would, Mr. James Hodge, can you come down here just a minute, please? Make your way down. I'll go ahead and start reading because it's kind of hard to get out of that crow's nest up there. I just want the council and the city to know that Chief Warrant Officer 2, James Hodge, joined the Army in October of 1996 and attended training at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. He retired October of 2017 after serving 21 years of active and National Guard time. During his career, Chief Hodge has served as a forward observer, fire support NCO, night team chief, radar operations officer, brigade targeting officer, and brigade electronic warfare officer. He participated in Operations Iraqi Freedom in 2004 and 5 and in 2007 to 2008. His awards and decorations include the Combat Action Badge, Joint Service Meritorious Unit Award, Army Meritorious Unit Award, Bronze Star Medal, Meritorious Service Medal, Army Commendation Medal with 2 oak leaf clusters, Army Achievement Medal with 3 oak leaf clusters, Army Good Conduct Medal with 2 oak leaf clusters, Army Reserve Components Achievement Medal, National Defense Service Medal with Star Device, Iraqi Campaign Medal with 2 Star Device, the Global War on Terrorism Expeditionary Medal, Global War on Terrorism Service Medal, Korea Defense Service Medal, Army Armed Forces Reserve Medal, and Army Overseas Service Ribbon with numeral 3 device. After returning stateside, Chief Hodge accepted a position with Russell Police Department in 2009, continuing his public service. After 4 years as a police officer, Chief accepted a position in the IT department with the city in 2013, where he still serves for us. On the occasion of your retirement from your military service, Chief, I congratulate you and thank you for your service, and I'd ask all of you to help me. Up on TV. We want you on TV too. Thank you so much for your service. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all. The rest of the mayor's report was going to be Mr. Steve Mallett from City Corp. I don't see him, and I'm not getting an answer, but there was one piece of business that I do know that he wanted to talk about, and that was replacing an outgoing member. Their recommendation was to place Mr. Max Mathis on their board. If the council wants to take action on that, I think we could go ahead and do that even without
Is he
Steve
here
being
tonight?
here. I don't see Steve, and
No.
Mr. Mathis, you're gonna put it on December?
Oh,
He's moved that to December, so.
oh, okay.
In that event, let's move on. We've got some pretty busy committee reports tonight. Chairman Freddie Harris, do you have anything for us from finance?
Yes, I do. I have to think here now. I'll try not to be so wordy. The Finance Committee met on, hope I get the right report. Let's see how it's on here. Okay. The Finance Committee met on, sometime. November 7th. Thank you, Kathy. I was absent. Recommended to come forward were the items of line item transfers from the Animal Department. This covers the overtime and the cleaning and all this kind of stuff. This is a usual expense. Mr. Vernon called me today. He's on vacation. I personally didn't see anything wrong with it, and I think it passed through the commission last Tuesday night. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I present that in the form of a motion.
Council, you've heard the chair's motion. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion's approved, Chair.
The approval of the payment for the amount of $211,508 for the El Paso improvements. I present that in the form of a motion.
Council, you heard the chair's motion. Any discussion?
Mayor, I have a question on that, please.
Okay.
There's two items on here. Is the 211,000 and 141,000 two separate items, two separate payments?
No, sir.
No.
I have 196,000 in the bank, and I need 141 more thousand to pay it off.
So you have 196.
I mean, no, I need to appropriate into the budget 141,000 to bring that up to 211 to write the check. That's just a budget appropriation. We have 196 in the bank. I have to put in the difference at the 211 to bring it up.
So you have 196 in the bank?
Yes, and I'm gonna have,
And you need 211?
yes. I have the 211 now because I got a check the first of the month.
Confused on one thing.
This is the final payment.
This is the final payment on El Paso, 11 months early.
Is this item 2 or 3 or both?
Both.
It's both. We have to appropriate to be able to write the check.
So if you have 196 in the bank, you only need 211, why aren't we doing 15,000?
You got 70 already appropriated, right?
Yes.
You need to
I
appropriate.
have 70 left over in the for the expense. We paid 500. I had 570,000 in the budget. We paid 500,000, our normal payment, in August. I have 70,000 in the bank, in the appropriation. I need 141 to get it up to 211.
Okay, so where's the 141 going to come from?
It's just an appropriation from the budget, for the budget. We have the money,
I understand what account is the money in.
general fund,
Why are we paying for a street project out of general fund?
because of the Rule 78. When we borrowed the money, we have to pay it out of the general fund. We borrowed the money and the state tax is paying us back.
So will we have been reimbursed for all of it?
Yes,
And that money comes to the general fund?
yes, from the sales tax, at half-cent sales tax.
Okay, all right, that makes more sense, okay.
Do we need to do 3 first? and then 2, or does it really matter?
You have to approve the payment, then appropriate the money.
Just do them together.
3 is not needed to appropriate the 211,000, because you already have some money to make it up to there.
The
Okay, let's
the
approve.
2 is for the payment.
2 is for the payment.
Okay, so for now, the committee is, we're
I'm
voting on item
presenting-
2, and that is
yes.
recommended by the finance
Yes,
committee.
because that wipes that one out, yes.
Any other questions or discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And
Now, the 141,000 is needed to make the final payment on the El Paso
Correct.
project.
Right.
And you will take that out of general fund.
Yes.
And we will get general fund money back when we get the 5,
We already have it.
you already have it,
Yes,
Right.
ma'am.
okay? All in favor?
Aye.
I mean, yes, so I'll present that in the form of motion. I get carried away here. Present that in the form of motion, Mayor.
good enough for me.
Okay.
Did I hear all ayes? Is there any noes? All right, then 2 and 3 are both approved, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, appropriations from various departments. Looks like just general stuff. You can look at that. Does anybody have any, oh, you already approved this. I present that in the form of a motion. This is the old meeting.
Council, you heard the chair's motion. Is there any discussion or questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item is approved, Madam Chair.
Appropriation for $8,010, utilities for the Aquatic Center. Present that in the form of a motion.
Council, you heard the committee's motion. Any discussion or questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That item's approved, Madam Chair.
I believe that's all I have.
Thank you.
Oh, tonight.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, tonight we met. We'll try not to be 30 minutes on this one. There was discussion for the lighting on Sequoia Way. Do we need to review this, or do we table? We need to bring this up for discussion. Discussion for lighting on Sequoia Way.
Well, I would move that we approve the $150,000 for the Entergy rented poles.
Instead of the $400,000.
Correct.
Yeah, I second that.
Okay, so we got a motion and a second for the $150,000 option. Is there discussion?
Yes. And I would direct these questions to our Public Works Director. We had talked about this in the Finance Committee meeting here at 5:30, but many of the people in the audience were not here at that time, and it was certainly not televised for the general public. So I'm going to ask some questions that I had asked before, if you don't mind. From Glenwood to the roundabout is, at least on my odometer, 9/10 of a mile. For the sake of math, we'll say a mile. You propose 39 light poles in that area, even though 1/2 mile of that is currently lighted from Glenwood to Neptune. Not very well, but it is lighted. So in reality, we're talking 39 light poles in a 1/2 mile stretch. From Arkansas Avenue to Knoxville Avenue, there's 13 poles. From Arkansas to Phoenix, and that is right at a mile, there's 10 poles, and 6 of those are at the intersections. You've got sidewalks on one side, on the north side of Parkway. Just like we do from Glenwood to the roundabout, we have sidewalk on the north side. My question to you earlier was, who makes the decision on how many light poles are placed there? And after consultation, ultimately it falls to the discretion of your department, you in particular. Is that 39 light poles, is that absolutely essential that we have that many and that short of a distance? when you compare
Well, that's
that.
based on the lighting spread that we're trying to achieve on that roadway. I wasn't prepared, I could have brought the design plans, but wasn't aware that you were going to bring that up this evening. But I'd be happy to share the photometrics with you.
I'm just curious how we come up with that particular number versus some other number.
It's based on the lighting that we're trying to achieve on the roadway.
Okay. Again, I'll mention something that I had mentioned earlier. From 16th Street to Elmira is exactly 1 mile. There are 9 Entergy poles. I just, for the life of me, don't understand. But again, I
Well, I
haven't seen the
suspect
numbers
there
that you're
was
looking
no
at, but-
design done on that lighting system.
Okay.
It would be my guess. I wasn't involved in that, so I don't know.
Mr. Westcott, if I may, in recent years, the past administration or so has tried to increase some lighting in certain areas, and from the past, I believe, Mayor Horton, it's been derived off of citizen requests and then what infrastructure is in place. It's my understanding on Sequoia Way, we years ago when we did Sequoia Way, we put in a qualifying trail, an 8-foot wide path, sidewalk, et cetera, to qualify as a trail, and there was no lighting done. There is a lot of people that utilize that, even, you know, after hours, dark, and I think there's been some requests and concerns and so forth, and there's other areas that can be identified and lighting programs implemented there, right, Mr. Jones?
That's correct.
This is just one that had been started, what, about 8 to 12 months ago, probably?
That's correct.
That this was identified and Mr. Jones started working on this. So it's not that he's picking and choosing one over the other. There was a question or identification in this area. If any of us or residents have ideas or concerns or suggestions on other areas, bring it to the mayor or bring it to Mr. Jones and let him take a look at it. You know, I don't want to pick this apart too hard,
No,
too
it's-
much. It needs to be lit. The question is, what type of light pole, et cetera. He's trying to light it to become pedestrian safe, pedestrian friendly, not vehicle friendly.
Okay, and I see that, and I appreciate that. My final question is, the half mile from Glenwood to Neptune, are you planning to replace the current lights that are there? If we go with the Entergy rented poles, are they planning to
I
replace
believe the
poles
lights that
there
are
or add to
there
that?
are just those typical, like, what I would refer to as a night watcher type.
It's kind of a
light.
mix and match through there.
I didn't notice
that
any
first half
roadway
mile.
lighting out through there. They're just, I mean, they provide some, yeah. We weren't going to remove those. That was not the
Okay.
original plan, no.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question, and I may have missed this because I was late earlier, but the cheaper ones cost more to maintain.
Well, no, that's not exactly true. They cost more. Our cost to Entergy is more, approximately twice as much. But they maintain those poles. I think the numbers are on the ones that we own. Entergy charges us a flat rate of $4.79 per pole.
If we buy the poles and put them up.
If we buy the poles and put them up. If Entergy supplies the poles and puts them up, then the cost is $8.76 per pole. So, but they would.
Would you please repeat how long it would take to break, what the...
Well, if you're wanting to make up the difference between the decorative poles and the standard roadway poles or fixtures, then, yeah, it was, the payback time on it was approximately 150 years.
The difference is if somebody breaks that pole, who's on the hook for it?
Well, ultimately, if we own it, it's our pole. If
Yes.
their insurance doesn't cover it, then we pay for it. If it's an Entergy pole, then I would assume that they would replace it.
Question, Mr. Mayor. We've got decorative poles now on O Street, H Street, El Paso, Phoenix.
Parker.
And I'm assuming the decorative poles were figured in for the new Skyline project?
They are included, yes.
Okay, is there some reason this was more costly or whatever on the Sequoia Way?
Oh, it's not more costly per pole than on those projects. I mean, they're,
So when did we start moving toward a trend in the more decorative poles?
probably, 3 to 4 years ago, or actually longer ago than that. I mean, the first job that we did them on was North Phoenix, which was, I believe, completed in 2012? Is that?
So that said, if we've moved toward that direction, what's the balance in the drainage and street fund that you're pulling this out of?
Well, right now, I mean, now keep in mind, a lot of that's earmarked for the
It's
205.
already earmarked, right?
But I believe, and Jerry, help me out here, I mean, there's close to 10 million.
10,148,000.
Which outside of the Core 205 project, there's approximately 16 million unallocated. If you only look at the core project of the projected monies between now and the end of the
Now, we're talking
tax.
about till the end of the sales tax?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just talking about what's in the bank right now, yeah. And that's not projected. We've got, but of that, there's roughly 10 million in the bank right now.
But then projected on out to the end of that sales tax would be somewhere in the neighborhood of,
I don't have that number in front of me. Jerry?
I'm hearing 16 million.
It's 16, I think what Mr. Tripp is referring to is that there would be 16 million after the allocation to the core, which will be somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think, I'm projecting about 8 million to the core. So, ultimately 24 million that we're looking at, round numbers.
24 million. I guess what my point is there's probably no one in this room that's tighter than me, or at least that's what my wife would tell you. And I'm all for saving tax dollars, but at the same time, I think the trend has been set for our city to make these improvements aesthetically, the trails that we're building, all these kind of things, and I would like to see us continue with that trend. And so I would hope that we would amend that motion to go back to the original request. And I would put that in the form of a motion to amend.
Can we have some more discussion before you do that?
I guess it can die for lack of a second.
I think we'd be making a huge mistake to invest this much money. I mean, we're talking $7,165 per light pole. And if we figure that every mile, at least this particular mile, is going to take 39 light poles, how many miles of streets do we have in the city of Russellville that need upgrades in their lighting? I mean, you're talking an enormous amount of money spent just for decorative lighting. Keep in mind that the bulbs in these decorative fixtures and the bulbs in the Entergy rented fixture are the same bulbs. It's the same light output. So what we're getting, or the issue here, is not necessarily keeping Russellville well lighted. It's a matter of making this particular place or that particular place more aesthetically pleasing. When we know that this money is going to come out of the Streets and Drainage Fund, which fortunately right now has a lot of money in it. When we know that's where the money's going to come from, and we know that, for instance, the city of Russellville has been plagued with a drainage issue since day one, and it hasn't lessened much, I would be much more in favor of spending the bulk of this money that we have in that fund to address the drainage issues rather than decorative lighting.
I would argue that $24 million is significant money to have the cushion to put in have our cake and eat it too. And I would, again, amend that motion to go back to the original request. That's my motion.
Second.
Okay, so we've got a motion to amend and a second on that to go back to the original. Is that bid still
Yeah.
applicable?
It's
Okay.
still
The
good.
bid amount.
Discussion, right?
I'm sorry, Mr.
We
Tripp.
can have further discussion at this
We
point.
can, sure. Discussion
Jo-
on the amendment.
Mr. Jones, so The projects that Mr. Sims has identified are,
Mr. Tripp, would you?
I'm
the
sorry.
mic- I'm sorry, we're
I'm
having a
sorry.
hard time
I'm
getting it
sorry.
picked up.
So the projects that Mr. Sims has identified are considered complete street projects.
That's a term we use, yes.
And for the most part, they're completed reworked, either new streets or completely reworked streets, with the exception of 8th Street between El Paso and Arkansas. That's probably the only section of all those streets that have not been reworked.
That where the decorative lighting was installed, that's correct.
So this would, in essence, be the first project that it's not a completed street where we're going to go with the decorative lighting.
Well, the timing's a little different, but it was what we would typically term as a complete street when it was constructed back in, except that it didn't have the lighting.
Minus
Minus the
street,
lighting.
minus the lighting.
When it was
And
constructed, I believe
landscaping.
back in 2007, 2008 era,
And minus the landscaping, of course.
and there was no landscaping, yes.
And is that whole section between the roundabout and Glenwood, that's all consistent with the same sidewalk and everything? Because I know part of it, we built up, doing the sidewalk, we built up a retaining wall in a couple yards. So all that is consistent in the complete street.
Yes, that completes a corridor. Actually, there's one segment of that corridor that has not been completed yet, but that's part of a corridor that actually runs from Maine, actually West Maine, out to, through Arkansas, through 16th, all the way out to Elmira.
Well, I'm talking about just from Glenwood to the roundabout, that whole section would be considered.
That's all part of that project that was done back in 2007, I believe.
So
Can I say something or ask, and then we need to move on?
Mr. Tripp, are you ready to
well,
yield, or
so are we,
next up?
in your opinion, or is this
midnight.
consistent with the other projects?
It's
that are
very
considered
consistent, yeah.
Complete streets.
Yes.
I mean, I understand Mr. Westcott's,
sure.
his position. I respect that. I get that. But at the same time, Mr. Sims has a valid point of, and the biggest thing is, for everybody to know, this is underground utilities, not not above ground utilities.
I'd like to point out one other thing as well. I mean, we're not proposing doing this on every street in town. In fact, we're actually working with Energy right now to get street lights, which will be their typical roadway lights along East Main. And they're putting together a project right now to complete that work. And there are some areas, on some of our, major, maybe commercial areas and highway commercial areas where standard highway roadway light would be more appropriate, and that's what we're doing in those locations. But we felt like this was one of our main residential arterial roads, and it would be nice to have decorative lighting along that route.
As
that
well as
corridor.
part of the bigger picture as far as a route, a multimodal,
Yes.
a billet trail path through sections of town, a part of a bigger picture, a path to connectivity.
Yeah,
and so forth.
I mean,
So this would be consistent with the projects that Mr. Sims identified, in your opinion?
that's correct. I agree completely.
Okay, is my turn?
Ms. Harris, yes.
Okay. Since you're talking about new streets and in that same general area, and next year you're going to do Inglewood. Are you going to do these same lights up and down Inglewood?
That's my plan right now, to do them along the new section of Inglewood that we're going to be.
And what sort of estimated cost will that be if we stick with the more expensive lights versus the Entergy lights? Tremendous, right?
It'll be similar to what you're seeing here.
It's a much longer distance, farther distance.
Yes, I don't know about much further, but it is a further distance.
Will that just go down to Honeysuckle, or will you bring that back on up to East Main Place? West
Well,
Main Place?
right now, as part of that project, we would only do to Honeysuckle.
So we're going to go from some lights in one area on the same street to different lights in...
No, they'd be the same lights. I mean, we would use this, again, okay, let me back up.
Okay.
If y'all decide this evening to not go with the decorative lights on this section, likely will not include the decorative lights on the other section. I mean,
And stick with the other standard basic lights that you're looking at. Okay,
Sure.
let me cover another street and then I'll hush, because we get this, I still get this all the time. Vancouver. Vancouver's become my favorite street in town. It seems to have been built, and then all the things they wanted came later. They have limited streetlights down through there. I think some have been added. I know we added 5 or 6 at one point. They too would like to have these decorative lights. What are we going to do when we hit this situation where they want to be connected with all these decorative lights?
I haven't had any requests on Vancouver about.
I'll have them call you.
Okay, that'd be fine. I mean, this is the first I've heard of it, but I think this is part of a bigger picture that I'm trying to.
I agree on the better lights and brighter and shining down.
Well,
I do.
Okay, I mean.
Cheaper is better, though.
I'm not gonna try to tell you that these lights are better in any way other than that they look better.
How many people really drive down the street and look at street lights?
Well, I mean, we could make this.
We need to go on. I know we can
Okay.
talk about this forever. Okay.
Beat this horse to death.
Okay, where am I?
Any other discussion?
Thank you.
All right, right now we're voting on Mr. Sims' amendment to go back to the original bid.
Of the 400,000?
That's correct. So, no other discussion? All in favor of Mr. Sims' amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
I guess we're going to call the roll.
Mr. Sims,
Yes.
Ms. Harris,
No.
that was Ms. Caruth.
Yeah,
Ms.
it was.
Caruth,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
No.
Freddie, did you say no?
I said no. 2 noes, 2 yeses so
I'm
far.
confused here. Mr. Tripp,
Yes.
Mr. Westcott,
No.
Mr. Wiley,
No.
Mr. George.
No.
I say motion fails.
Okay, so the amendment fails. Now back to the original motion, unless there's more discussion on it, to go ahead and do the lighting plan, but at the $157,000 price with the plain lights.
150,000. Is that right?
Yeah, with rounding. Discussion on that? Go ahead and call the roll.
For the cheaper
Mr.
lights.
Westcott,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Tripp,
Yes.
And this is for the
Ms.
cheaper
Carew.
lights. Yes.
Mr. Wiley,
Yes.
Mr. Sims,
No.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Ms. Harris.
Yes.
Motion carries.
So sad.
Okay.
All right, back to you, Madam Chair.
Ooh, this is a long night. Consideration of the ordinance establishing a permitting permit and fee for the private clubs to sell and dispense alcoholic beverages in the city of Russellville. This was passed through the the committee, and I make a motion. Presented to you in the form of a motion.
Okay, council, you heard the motion.
Mayor,
This
that's
is-
an ordinance. Do we have to
This
suspend
is
the
an
rules?
ordinance, so procedurally, they can still motion to suspend? Yes. Get this done?
Motion to suspend.
Second.
Thought that might be what you were getting at.
Yeah.
Motion to suspend and read one time,
One time only.
title only with short explanation? All right, so the motion
No idea what you're saying.
is to suspend the rules, read one time by title only with a short explanation. Is that your second, Mr.
Correct.
Westcott? All right. We got a motion and a second to suspend. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Mr. Smith?
An ordinance establishing a permitting process and fee for private clubs for the selling or dispensing of alcoholic beverages in the city of Russellville, Arkansas, levying a tax and supplemental tax on gross proceeds or gross receipts derived from the charges to members for the preparation and serving of mixed drinks or the cooling and serving of beer and wine drawn from the private stocks of the members for consumption only on the premise for served in the city of Russellville and for other purposes. This ordinance, if passed, would incorporate the recent act of 11/12 of 2017, setting up a permitting process within the city. It would also raise the permitting fee for private clubs from currently $250 by ordinance to $750. It would also raise the supplemental taxes for mixed drinks, beer and wine, to 5%, and then also just for an additional 2% just for the serving of mixed drinks. It would set up a penalty for the violation of not having a permit or violation of this ordinance. It would repeal the old ordinances that regulated private clubs and bring the city in conformity with the recently passed act.
Okay, council, you've heard the motion and the description. Is there discussion? Do I hear a motion to take action?
Motion to approve,
Well, we did that, though. That was
That was her motion.
or motion to adopt, rather.
motion to adopt. That was Mr. Westcott. Do I hear a second? Second is
Brown.
Mr. Brown. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Westcott,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Tripp,
Yes.
Ms. Caruth,
Yes.
Mr. Wiley,
Yes.
Mr. Sims,
Yes.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Ms. Harris.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Mayor, can I ask Trey,
Yes.
do we need to have an emergency clause because of the time limit to get to January 1st?
It's right here.
It's, if you want to, it'd probably be better just because
Because
wanna
January
start-
1st, their fee is due $250, and this
Yeah.
doesn't go into effect unless we emergency clause it till
Right.
February, right?
right, and then you can collect December for next year.
Motion for the emergency clause.
We have a motion on the emergency clause for Mr. Westcott. Is
Go
that a
for it.
second for Mr. Tripp?
Sure. I will.
Ms. Harris?
Yes.
Okay, we have a second, Ms. Harris. All in favor of the emergency clause, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Mr. Westcott,
Yes.
Ms. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Tripp,
Yes.
Ms. Caruth,
No.
Mr. Wiley,
No.
I don't believe
Mr. Sims,
Yes.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. That cleans up item 2. Madam Chair, that's approved. That brings you to item 3.
Discussion was held in our finance meeting regarding the agreement with Waste Management regarding adjustment of fees, and I think it just got moved forward for a discussion with the council.
I believe that's correct. Okay, council, you heard the motion to have discussion on item 3. We heard from Mr. Wheatley from Waste Management. We have an inclination to deal with this one way or the other.
The total cost is gonna be about 50 cents per home, right, per month? Is that right?
Yeah. I'm sorry, Mr. Brown.
50,000.
Okay, he answered, yeah, 50 cents, okay,
Okay.
good.
Mr. Whately, what will the money be used for that y'all collect?
You asked me what would the money be used for?
Yeah. What's,
It's just an increase in everything that we do, an increase in the cost of carbon products, whether it be tires.
such as cost of living adjustments for your employees?
Yes, and that's the basis. We did not choose the number. The number's chosen by the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Price Index.
Mr. Mayor, how long has it been since the city of Russellville employees got a cost of living adjustment?
2 years? 2 years. But You could argue that that was done in arrears because for the 2 years before, more than 2 years before, we did not do that.
And Mr. McCoy, we have no, doesn't look like the way our numbers are running, we're going to be able to do that this year. Is that correct? I really appreciate Waste Management, but I don't understand why their employees should receive a cost of living adjustment and our employees should not. At the citizens' cost, yeah.
Mayor, may I say something?
Yes, Mr. Wheatley.
Prior to all of this, in 2008, citizens were paying the larger amount. With this increase, 10 years later, they're still going to have in their pockets $50.64 extra per year, $4.22 per month more than they were before the contract started. And Mr. Sims, I understand where you're coming from, but it's not just for employee raises. It's for every cost that we have in our company, whether it be parts, like I say, tires, oil, hydraulic fluid, things like that, cost of insurance, etc.
With all due respect, I would think that those costs and fees that you're referring to should have been considered in the cost of doing business when this contract was initially offered to the city. And although it was offered with the option of coming back to the council and asking for an increase, I hope you're not offended when I say no. Now, the others may view it differently, but I think if you have contracted with us for a 5-year time period or however long this is at a certain rate, then I personally feel no obligation to change the fee structure now.
We felt like, and the contract also said, Mr. Westcott, that if we were to be able to provide adequate information, that it would not be denied. That was the way we put in the pro forma when we bid the contract at the beginning.
Mr. Wheatley, if I may, so currently 2017 is year 3 of the current 5-year contract, correct? So this increase would be for year 4, go into effect for year 4, potentially stay the same into year 5, or, you know, regardless if you guys ask or get, et cetera. Is that correct? You know, me personally, you know, I'm not generally in favor of a tax increase. This is not, quote, a tax increase, but it is an increase. But I'm going to say something that my fellow council members probably won't appreciate too much. But I think we have to be careful up here casting stones, if you will, at a private entity trying to receive a CPI, even though I personally am not in favor of it. But I think we have to be careful because how many fees have we raised this year? How many business permit fees? We just, item number 2, we just raised alcohol permit fees. How many fees have we raised? So how can we cast a stone at somebody else for asking? So I say that for the tone towards coming from this bench.
Well, do you have any recommendations? I mean, you accept it as it is, or?
I would be much, I don't really have any rationale to say this, to base this off of. However, it would be easier for me to stomach, or me to go along with, if you will, if it was, you know, half that amount. But
a quarter,
but that may not be, you know,
that
doable.
won't even buy a cup of coffee.
You know, my concern is I don't ever like to raise a tax. And while this is not a tax, this is, you know, a forced expense on the residents of the city. So it's an indirect tax.
And it's tied to a tangible number. The CPI is kind of, anytime you put in a mechanism that lets, one reason that's in there is so that they could be as competitive as they could on the rates at the start of the contract and forecast the best that they could. But tying it to the CPI to give them the right to ask, you don't have to do either one, but they're not out of I don't think they're out of order asking, because according to government statistics, the cost of living and cost of doing business has raised the percentage that's in your request. And so doing a quarter cent, a half cent, monkeying back and forth, that's at the council's pleasure. But as Mr. Wheatley mentioned during finance, they didn't make the number up. They went with the federally recognized cost of living.
And generally speaking,
I have to be a little bit sympathetic because our workers' comp went up. But you guys all see it. Y'all know it better than I do. So,
you know, I think Mr. Moore can contend to this because he gets the majority of the calls. You know, no system is ever perfect. No company is ever perfect. We as a city are far from perfect. But I believe that when issues get escalated up the ladder, Waste Management has done a decent job or better, you know, at least a decent job, if not better, of addressing those to perform according to this contract on to the residents. And, you know, does that constitute that they deserve this? I don't know, but, you know, I think that they've definitely, with the communication provided, you know, I think they've done, you know, a decent or better job. You know, they're not perfect. We all make mistakes.
In all fairness to me, right? I think you go back, last 4 years, or when we started, it was $18 and something on my water bill. All right, in fairness to these people, they're asking for still less than what this thing started with. And I'm happy with my service. And in all fairness with them, I think 50 cents is righteous. So.
You know, this council body has raised permit fees, other fees, raised the millage. You know, I don't quite see the difference.
Mr. Moore would like to add something.
I've worked with Mr. Wheatley and Waste Management for approximately 8 years. Over the original contract that was started in 2009 is when it went into effect, I believe in October. We renewed or rebid the contract in 2014, October. The contract does state specifically that they are allowed to ask for an increase, a rate increase from the council after every October based on the CPI increase that you all have been talking about. Having worked with Waste Management for this amount of time, I have never had any issue with Waste Management addressing issues that we are experiencing in the field. They've always been quick to correct these issues. Many times it's not their issue, although they continue to correct it. I'd also like to add that Waste Management has been very gracious in setting recycle containers at the yard waste facility for free, no charge to the city, in return for the recycle that has been collected there. That has been changed a couple of times, bounced back and forth with Green Source in Clarksville, who does charge us to set those containers, charge the city to set those containers, plus they charge the city to empty those containers. I have worked with Mr. Wheatley twice on this to have their free service as opposed to paying. Both times they have graciously agreed to do that. Personally, I feel Waste Management is desiring of this increase. I think they have a great company, they're great to work with, and I personally think they deserve to have an increase. Thank you, Council.
Mr. Mayor, I don't think anyone's denying their right to ask for it, but back to my original point, I can't give any kind of increase to a company's employees when we can't give them to our own. I would point out that this dies for lack of a motion.
Any other?
Pardon?
Is
We
there
haven't
any-
asked for a motion, have we?
Not yet.
No.
No, okay.
Well, we kind of did.
Oh, you kinda did.
You put it on the agenda, it's
We
a
did-
form of the
It's
motion.
a motion to
We-
discuss.
We did a motion to discuss. We do not have a motion to adopt.
Now
Unless
we need a
somebody wants to
motion.
make that now.
Yeah, make a motion to adopt.
Ms. Harris motions to adopt.
Well, it's going to stay at the discussion stage unless we tackle it tonight. Is that correct?
I guess it should die, unless we table it, or you'd have to take some kind of action, because technically, one meeting doesn't carry past itself, right? So that's correct. You could make a motion to table till next month.
I'll second so we can vote on it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to adopt. Other discussion? Going once, going twice. Won't we do a roll call, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Ms. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Wiley?
No.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
No.
Mr. Westcott?
No.
Ms. Caruth?
No.
Mr. Sims?
No.
Mr. George?
No.
Motion fails.
All right. Item 3 is declined. Madam Chair, that brings you to item 4.
Discussion of the Public Works Building and ATU. If we decide on this, then I guess we need to proceed with the motion.
What is y'all decide?
I'll make a motion that we, well, how would I make this motion? I make a motion we trade properties with Arkansas Tech for the building on 16th Street.
Just gonna trade like that with no details?
Straight trade?
Huh?
Straight
Straight
trade?
across.
Trade
Okay.
with no details.
I've got the discussion with that.
Well, we got a second.
Well, we need a second.
I second it.
Okay. We got a
Do we have-
motion and
do
a
we-
second.
We have no
We're
details?
trading them straight across. no
Yeah,
details.
I think everyone's looking for details, a
And
story.
what they're-
Well, we just have to
Where
make a
they
motion
left
before we discuss.
Okay. We got a motion and a second, so now we'll do discussion. What they said was they would like for the council to make a motion to trade the properties even. Our property appraised for $579. Their property at its last appraisal was $590. We have more acreage. I think they have about the same under roof. Their building's quite a bit newer. Mr. Jones, are you still here? Did you ever go out and look at it and see if it could even fit your equipment in?
I just went out there, I wasn't able, there wasn't anyone there when I went out, but, you know, I've looked at it in the past, and, I mean, we can make it work, you know, with some property across the street for some additional yard area there on property that I believe the city already owns, adjacent to Hickey Park. It's a workable solution. I don't have any idea at this time, you know, what kind of cost we would entail but obviously there's going to be an expense and some remodeling and just the moving expense. We have some large lifts and so forth that will have to be moved and relocated.
Will you have to build some buildings to cover some of your machinery if you put them across the street also?
I think we will, but I can't definitely answer that right now. I mean, I would suspect that we would have to. Until we got in there and just started laying some stuff out, it would be difficult to accurately answer that question.
When we looked at the other property that we didn't decided not to do,
Mhm.
get, and you were out there that day and you were talking, I think I recall this, you were excited almost, I think, that you had a area where you could store dry sand.
Mhm. Yeah,
Okay.
there was a lot more under roof on the other property.
Okay, well,
That's-
you have to have a building where you can store dry
Well, we don't.
sand?
We don't currently
You just
have-
wanted one?
Yeah, that was one of the things, some of our materials could have been put under roof that we currently
That are
have
out.
out in the elements. That's correct.
Where, if we do this, would you get the extra money to do the extra improvement that you're going to need to accommodate? You'd have to fence in over there and everything, right? You would have to do,
Well, now, the area, I believe most of this property that we're talking about is fenced in right now. There would have to be some fencing done on the property across the street that we would
right,
utilize.
that's what I'm talking about,
Yes.
across the street, yes.
Yes.
I've gotten familiar with the property
Mhm.
where that is. But across the street, any improvements you do over, anything.
Yeah,
you do
I mean, there would be money that would have to be expended. That's correct.
That is a dirt area that you're talking about across the street, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you would need to pave that, grass that, gravel that.
At the
or something.
at the very least, gravel it. That would be something that we would have to make a decision on. I mean, our current yard right now, it was gravel for many years, and then was paved at some point. So, I mean, those are decisions that we would have to make, and obviously there would be cost involved, and that would really honestly be the next step, would be to determine what the total cost would be, and then, at that point, make these final decisions on different options.
And since we've been hearing through these budget hearings that your department actually works on most of our city vehicles and stuff,
Well, yeah.
will you have an area to do that?
I believe that there is a large, shop or warehouse area that would be converted into a shop.
Where you,
On
in
that.
the, on that?
Yeah,
in
yeah,
the
we
building?
would absolutely have to have some kind of, maintenance area, which, I believe that building does have an area that could be converted into that area.
Are you saying this with a smile?
Well, I mean, I think I've been pretty straightforward with everyone as far as what my desire is, but I understand the reason for this, and I'm certainly.
And you're willing to cooperate?
I'm definitely going to cooperate.
Okay.
So.
Mayor?
Mr. Brown?
Have they discussed anything as far as timeframe, us exiting, getting into the new facility? Have they discussed anything?
There's not as much pressure on moving,
Is it selling?
even as there was, and now, they mentioned that this is not something that's a done deal, but they mentioned Tuesday we had a deal up there that we were all at, and they mentioned that they have asked for an extension. The rush was that if they go beyond December 31st of this year, they have to go back to get a new approval for their method of funding, one of their state's mechanisms. They told me the other day that they have asked for an extension on this one, and so, we don't have to even have the paperwork done by December. So if the council would rather table this until Mr. Jones could maybe get with somebody and go look inside, or however you want to deal with it.
Do we have time to do that?
We'd have plenty on that, yes, ma'am.
Well,
Yeah.
that's fine with me if we can do that.
I would certainly be in favor of tabling that. When it was mentioned just a moment ago that the total expenses, the numbers of what it would take to actually move would be something that we would look at here at a later date, but I would think that would be one of the first things that we would address and know up front is some hard numbers of what it's going to take for us to open up for business in that new location.
Well, we gave him over 200,000, not just in light pole savings.
So I would move to table this.
Well, let's see, proceed.
Excuse me, I should
Got a
have said
motion and a second
We do have a motion and to swap, second to swap properties,
So
property swaps.
I think they all agree they want to table.
Well, they
Is
can
that a
make a,
supplemental motion, or is that?
it's
Okay.
a subsidiary. so
If we
yes.
got
All
more
right.
time.
All right, so now we have a subsidiary motion for Mr. Westcott to table. Does anybody agree with that?
What you did, didn't you, Larry?
Does anybody else feel like
I
they should
agree
table?
with
Table.
Second, yeah.
All right, so now we got a second. So we're voting on the motion to table this until December. Any other discussion?
Can I ask a question, just real quick? I mean, for the next meeting, are y'all wanting me to have some cost information for?
Next meeting.
Okay.
Can I clarify something about this?
Sure.
You know, I'm sorry, but I'd rather him spend more time on drainage than worrying about a move that we don't necessarily need to make. Just want to point that
So-
out.
You have a month to think
Well,
about
and
it.
I'm not saying that you've got to come back next month, but I'm just saying, I'd like to see some numbers before we
No, I-
finally vote on this, whenever that is.
Well, okay.
So where are we?
Okay, any other discussion?
Give me a second, I'll
So
go on.
for now, we're voting on the motion to table till December. You want to call the roll? Mr. Westcott's motion and Mr. Brown's second.
If we don't table it, we're gonna be here till today.
Mr. Westcott?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Ms. Caruth?
Yes.
Mr. Wiley?
Yes.
Mr. Sims?
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Ms. Harris?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, so that item 4 is tabled till next month, Madam Chair. What else you got?
A lot. We have, these are line item transfers from the fire department. Ordinary end-of-year expenses, $30,000. I present that in the form of a motion.
Council, you heard the motion on item 5. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 5 is approved, Madam Chair.
Second one is also a pass-through. In lieu of tax, it's $22,820. That was approved, so I recommend that in the form of a motion.
Council, you heard the motion on 6. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 6 is approved.
Number 7 is also a pass-through from the police department for vehicle maintenance, $1,962. I present that in the form of a motion. It's an insurance pass-through.
Motion is for item 7. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 7 is approved.
I guess if Richard Setting, if we need a discussion, Richard Setting can come forward and explain these chairs. But I see items 8, 9, and 10, all are for purchases of the chairs for the new fire station. They're different types of chairs, but they're needed chairs for different departments in the fire station. And it's under the normal bid of whatever, $20,000, $30,000. And I present that in the form of a motion.
Council, you heard the chair's motion. Is there any discussion?
Mayor, where are we buying these chairs at?
All of this is coming from Burris Incorporated.
Okay. That's what,
Why is this in front of us again?
pardon me?
Why is
It was
this?
a little,
Because it's not on the state contract.
yeah, it got a little funky because most of the stuff was on the state contract. This was not. But it fell within the $20,000
Under the
limit, so we
$20,000.
did the 3 prices.
So do we do this for everything that's not on the state contract that's under $20,000?
Yes.
Yeah.
Between
Yeah, we've
Okay.
done fencing and we've done, mostly it's when we do parks. This is the first time we've had to do anything like this on.
Is it between 5 and 20 or 10 and 20? I mean, there's a line under.
1,000 to 20,000.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Was there a specific reason why we were going with Burris on these, even though,
We're going with Apollo, a Eurotech, and they didn't put on number 8, the one that
Well, the 3 sheets that I've got here, one of them has Burris, Walmart, and Wayfair.
Right. I
And
think
Burris,
Wayfair's
Staples.
the cheaper, isn't it?
But there's a better chance.
Well, on the first page that I've got here, the
I think
Walmart was
Mr. Setting can clear this up.
less expensive.
Asking all those questions, they want to last a long time and not just fall apart.
One of the things that came to my attention on this was the fact that Burris was able to supply a big portion of this, and they are a state contract company.
Right.
But then these other items were things that they weren't able to supply, so therefore they were going outside, and they were actually getting some of these items cheaper. And so, and it's some items that are kind of unique to a firehouse, and that
Correct.
we've got a new lounge area and things like that, and
They're
we're
heavy-duty
outfitting
chairs
that.
that can last a long time, leather. The men weigh over 200 pounds. I asked Mr. Setian all these questions today, and they, you know, they want them to last for years and not 6 months or something. The services with Burris's, they will come, set them up. No one has to screw them together there. And having worked with Burris's myself for years, I've never seen them fall safe of fall. They're
And then,
going to take care of the product themselves.
some of this furniture too will be outdoors, in the outdoor area, so you've got to consider the wear and tear on that long term.
Well, he didn't tell me that part.
Mr. Setian, would you like that? Wait.
Sure, sure. Actually, Mr. Sims, the what's in front of you are chairs that are inside. Some of them are going to belong in the offices, and the others will be in what we call the living quarters. And the only reason we're here to seek your permission is because they are not under the state contract. Okay. And yes, you do see a local provider that's a little more expensive, but as Ms. Harris stated, we're going to get obviously delivery, installation, and they're going to stand by their product locally.
Sure.
And always be there, and plus we're shopping local, so that's going to be good for the area.
No, and I just wanted that to be expressed
Yes.
to the audience and anyone who might see these numbers to know the advantages of not only shopping local, but one source for all of this instead of 3 separate sources. If nothing else, you'll save on freight.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I'm all for it. I just wanted that to be clarified for those who might look at these numbers and go, well, why did they go with Burris versus Walmart, for instance?
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
And they will be coming back for that outdoor stuff, because it's needed too.
Okay, I
So-
believe this was,
I think I present that in the form of a motion.
there you go.
There you
8,
go.
9, and 10
Thank you.
is all in the motion from the Finance Committee. Is there any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That is approved, Madam Chair.
Number 11 is for just a resolution authorizing the destruction of old district court records, and that is pretty much established by state, I believe, if I recall, and it's just time to do it, but we have to get permission, so I present that in the form of a motion.
Council, you heard the chair's motion on item 11. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 11 is approved.
Okay, number 12, since the list got so long, I put tabled by that, so I'm going to say that's tabled for tonight.
Yes.
Okay, number 13 is the update on the convention center, and I will turn that over to Mr. Smith. I present that in the form of a motion. The mayor can present it. I mean,
Yeah, it's just a discussion item, but Mr. Smith has the most current information.
most current update on the convention center.
This is the most current is that, as I explained earlier, last Friday I had sent out documents, a termination agreement for the master development contract and a termination agreement for the ground lease with Mr. Hunt's attorney. I had inquired about it earlier today, and shortly thereafter, inquiring about it, I've received copies of the execution of both by Mr. and Mrs. Hunt. So the originals are in the mail, but for all effective purposes, this will end our association with Hunt Properties GP and free the city up to pursue another developer or developers to look at the convention center.
So, Mr. Smith, once you receive them in hand, it's effectively executed?
We'll need the mayor to execute the city's part, but y'all have already given that prior authority if the deadline had passed, so it will. And so he'll execute the city's part and it'll be over at that point, but they've already done their part, so they've already shown their clear intent. They want this arrangement to cease.
Mayor, on the topic of a convention center, and somebody said earlier, a few minutes ago or earlier, about moving forward and, talking to someone in the future, have we established yet how or who that process, what that process is going to look like? Is that something that the mayor's office is going to do? Is that something like that the Alliance Group is going to do? Have we looked at it that close yet, if we have somebody that interested in it, to when this becomes ready to be put into play?
We really hadn't. We've kind of been holding off until we get this and see how the timing would work out. And today was a little bit of a good surprise, but if the council is okay with it, I'd be pleased to make a few exploratory calls, just see if there's any interest out there. But pretty much everybody that was involved with it in the past on the Alliance side there's a few that are still around, but not as active. And so, and at this point, I mean, they came in, they made a recommendation, and then the city has done everything since with Mr. Hunt. I think we're pretty familiar with it. Why don't we see if there's any interest out there, and if there's not, then we'll look at maybe doing an RFQ or whatever. But I think there's probably some parties that are still interested even after a long time. Maybe we could get them involved and let the council and the city attorney work it out.
Thank you.
That'd be, is that
I was just
okay?
I was just curious, and my only concern is sometimes in the past it seems like things have been rushed sometimes. And
yeah.
Just be sure that sometimes when we get rushed, we overlook some details. Just make sure Mr. Smith has ample time to do his portion, do his due diligence in it. And when we get in a hurry, it seems like when we have regrets later down the line.
Very good. Anything else?
Oh, I turned my sheet. No, sir, I think I'm through. Thank you.
All right, that will be it for finance. Personnel Committee, Chairman Phil Sims, do you have anything for us?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we met on November the 2nd and again on this past Monday evening, November 13th. We have one ordinance and two resolutions to put before the council. The first ordinance is an ordinance amending the section of the City of Russellville's Personnel Policy Manual and for other purposes. And if you'll look at the packet that's before you, you'll see that basically we're adding a social media policy and changing a little bit in the position descriptions to where they are reviewed every 5 years. Actually put a timeline there. Hiring of relatives and things is being clarified to add the signature of the mayor, and that basically is what we're looking at on changes in the personnel handbook, and I would put that in the form of a motion.
Okay. Council, you heard the chair's motion. This is an ordinance. Does anybody want to suspend the rules? And
Can we have discussion first? If that's a
we
motion?
can, yeah, because technically the committee made the motion. So.
Mr. Sims, on page 4 or 5, it talks about hiring relatives and nepotism. But you didn't put that in your dialogue there. This is included in part of this ordinance, correct?
Yes, the current policy is there before you. Got the old policy and the new policy, and basically it stays like it was in the past, except it does have to have written approval by the department head and the mayor.
I would like to amend that motion to remove hiring within the same department. I see no good with hiring family members within the same department.
I agree.
So that is in form of a motion, amending his motion.
Well, I would amend that motion even farther.
We got to.
Okay.
Can we discuss that?
Can we discuss that?
Let's vote. We need to, well, we got a motion and a second to amend, so we can discuss,
Yes.
okay. We did have a second, right?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I think I pointed out in our Personnel Committee meeting that all the ordinances and things that we pass should be sustainable for the future. And I don't like never saying never, and this would put us in a position where we say never. And the current policy states that no one, like for example, husbands and wives cannot work in the same department. But I could see in the future there might be some brothers or something that might serve in the police department, yet one would not supervise the other. I can see where firemen could end up being in the same department, but yet working different shifts. And basically it goes back to the fact that if we eliminate all relatives and things, first off, it's not a very large town. Second off, we're trying to keep our young people in Russellville, and this works against that very effort. We're going to tell a young man that they can't work in the city of Russellville because they have a relative in one of our departments, maybe out at the airport, maybe street department or wherever, and we tell them that, well, you'll just have to commute to Morrilton or Clarksville, and I see no benefit to that.
Mayor, does the police and the fire, they're under civil service, so they're under different rules than the city is?
Well, then that clarifies it even further that we need to have a uniform policy across the entire city.
I think we need to all get together and talk about it for a month. I'd recommend this be tabled.
I see Mr. Sims's point on, two brothers working in the fire department and police department, but at the same time, I see no good with a mother, son, father, daughter situation in the same department. And you can't say that won't happen because you don't know.
It has happened. It is happening.
I mean, so, I understand that point, but you can't open it up and get abused or have a bad situation somewhere else. Because, let's say you have a 3 or 5 person department and you have a direct family relationship connection with 2 of those 3 or 4 or 5.
And that's why the next resolution we're dealing with will
Mr.
change
Sims,
the
if you don't care to
application.
let me finish.
Go
please.
ahead.
Thank you. There's just no good to come from that.
I just think we need to discuss it and not get angry over this. We all have different opinions on this, and I think as a council, there's no rush on this. We know it. It's been in existence for a while, and people have gotten sensitive. Feelings have gotten hurt. My feelings have gotten hurt. And I think we should discuss this again. And another nepotism thing was put up by another council lady, and it was given almost no consideration and without any discussion. I wasn't at the last meeting, though. But I would like to have more discussion on this and see if we can clean this up a little better and get something that we can live with for a period of time. Obviously, I have a personnel policy that I had that was dated 2010, and certainly there are things that have been changed and amended, and so these things can be changed and amended even with the next council. So I would say let's try to look at this and get this a little better before we move forward. I mean, this has been put before us tonight as an emergency. I haven't seen this document until right now, and we said sometime back we weren't going to do things like this anymore. So I'd like to see this tabled. That'd be my motion, unless there's another motion on the floor.
Is that your motion?
That's my motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we've got just working in reverse order, we've got a motion from Ms. Harris and a second from Ms. Caruth to table.
Okay, question. When are we going to discuss this?
We may have a special meeting on this.
Okay, that's why I asked.
I think it would be great to have a special meeting for this.
That's why I asked, when are we going to do it?
We can set a date right after Thanksgiving.
I think it's well done.
Yeah.
I think we probably do need to discuss it because this is the first time I've seen it. But, yeah, let's have a special meeting.
Okay, any other discussion? The vote would be on the motion to table. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay, so then that item would be tabled to next month. It sounds pretty clear. Mr. Chairman, do you have any other business for
I
us?
do. We have two more resolutions. The first resolution of the two, a resolution authorizing the Human Resources Director to add a question to the application for employment with the City of Russellville, Arkansas, and for other purposes. And basically, the question added to the application would be, are you related to anyone currently working in the City of Russellville? And secondly, what is that relationship and what is their name? I would put that in the form of a motion.
And that is a resolution. Council, you heard the committee's motion. Is there any discussion?
Well, I haven't seen that one either, but that one is something that I've set in on discussion on, and if that's been added, I don't have an issue with that one.
I think this goes hand in hand with the other.
Just hang on and do it all at once?
We can discuss it.
Discuss them later?
I think this one actually clarifies the change that we made above so that we know, a department head knows on the front end what applicants might possibly have a conflict within their department. And that in turn solves the problem that was trying to be addressed by the first ordinance. Plus, we left all those other
Well, then I guess we do need
things.
to wait until this ordinance has been approved to approve the other one.
I would disagree with that.
I honor your disagreement.
I see no issue.
I still disagree, but.
I see no issue with putting this one sentence or two sentences into play because it's, it's not a complicated.
Well, I didn't either.
That's not a complicated part and it
Yeah,
stands
that's-
alone by itself.
Yeah.
It's a minor
Okay.
change to one form.
Okay, those that are saying, let's wait, do you want to put it in a motion? No? Any other discussion? And we are left with the committee's motion recommending adoption.
And which one is that one?
Adding the question. or
Adding the question.
one.
Oh,
I don't have
The
it.
second one back there.
oh, another one back there? That one? Okay.
No other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Mr. Chairman, that resolution is approved.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the last resolution we have is a resolution clarifying the duties of the business permit clerk, administrative assistant in the Community Development Department of the City of Russellville, Arkansas, and for other purposes. And I would, before I move for its adoption, I would point out that Mr. Smith has come prepared to explain some of his findings at the Municipal League and according to job descriptions found within the city clerk's positions. And that's where this was drawn, and I would also remind fellow council members that they asked for something in writing, and this is what we have brought forth from the committee, and I would recommend it, put this in the form of a motion.
Are you seeking passage on this tonight?
Yes, ma'am.
Then I would seek that we go into executive session.
Can
I
we
too
not
came
wait till
prepared.
Mr. Smith kind of explains the findings that he had?
Sure.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep. Mr. Smith?
I believe that's been addressed before, but there are really two main jobs of the city clerk under state law. That's to have custody of the laws and ordinances of the city, and also for keeping the minutes. And these other ones that you see before you in this resolution have never been assigned by law to the city clerk's list of duties. Therefore, tonight, this is just clarifying those duties, assign them non-exclusively to the business permit clerk, administrative assistant,
Not assign them to whom? I didn't hear that.
to the business permit clerk, administrative assistant for community development.
Is that all you have?
For now.
I ask again that we go into executive session.
You're making a motion?
Make a motion
Second.
What's the purpose?
to discuss this matter.
But is it, this matter's a resolution about duties, not about a public employee.
It is.
It's a resolution, job duties on a position, not a person.
But you're changing the duties of the employees.
Again, it does not fit the state law.
I believe it does.
I believe it doesn't.
I'd still like to ask for an executive deal. Otherwise, I need to pass out my brochures here, and we need to discuss what I brought.
To quote the state law, an executive session will be permitted only for the purpose of considering employment, appointment, promotion, demotion, discipline, or resignation of any public officer or employee.
And
the resolution before you is about assigning job duties on a job position, not a particular employee, which is what the state law I just said quoted.
If we pass this without going over what I know and what I have brought with me tonight, then we are changing something that we haven't cleared up, and that includes an employee and personnel matters.
I believe it's talking about job positions, which is not contemplated by the act. But you can take a vote and do what you want.
I would like to go into executive session.
Okay, and you have made that motion, and Mr. Westcott has seconded.
Correct.
Let's call the roll on who is for executive session and who is not.
Can I have a clarification or discussion question?
Sure.
Is the executive session pertaining to potential employment, termination, promotion, or disciplinary action?
Very possibly.
Any other discussion? You want to do a roll call on this? We're voting on to go into executive session or not?
Ms. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Westcott?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
No.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Ms. Carew?
Yes.
Mr. Wiley?
No.
Mr. Sims?
No.
Mr. George?
Yes.
We're in executive session.
I gotta have another chair.
Mr. Mayor, I move to return from executive session.
I don't know.
We have a motion by Mr. Westcott to return from executive session. Does anybody want to second that?
Second.
Where'd that come from?
Brown.
Second, Mr. Brown. All in favor of returning from executive session, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are back in regular session.
Mr. Mayor, there was no action taken in executive session.
So that brings us back to where we left off. We were contemplating the Personnel Committee's motion for a resolution clarifying the duties of business permit clerk and admin assistant.
Mr. Mayor, before we, since we're still discussing that, I would ask for clarification from Mr. Smith on his findings from the Municipal League and also the ordinances that pertain to this new resolution.
The state law defines the city clerk duties as having custody of all the laws and ordinances of the city and also for keeping of the, or drawing up and keeping of the minutes. There are no other state law duties assigned. There are no ordinance duties assigned to the city clerk. This resolution is to assign duties which had been assumed maybe to be city clerk, but after checking along with the human resources director, they were never incorporated into any type of law. This would assign them to the business permit clerk, also known as the administrative assistant for community development.
Okay, other discussion? Do we want to make a supplemental motion or?
Mr. Smith, in bringing this together, you referenced some other cities and how they handle their clerk treasurer positions.
Yes. Originally, when the city clerk treasurer came into being for our city, it was done so at the request of the city council back then. I was tasked with drawing up the ordinance to make that into being by the city council. I spoke with the city of Fayetteville city clerk at that time, used their ordinance that they did when they merged their city clerk treasurer, the city clerk and city treasurer into the city clerk treasurer, and set up a finance department with the finance director. That was the basis of the model for the current city clerk treasurer and director of finance.
And that was all approved by the councils of that time?
That is correct, and that's what currently is in operation today.
And then moving forward to the permit clerk duties, you referred to some cities having the duties of the permit clerk under the clerk, or clerk does permit work?
They can really, there's only two duties assigned to the city clerk, and those are the minutes and the custodian of the laws.
So any employee in the city hall could be assigned the duties that we're looking at right here. And we're choosing to assign these to our current administrative specialist permit clerk in code enforcement.
Yes, I could tell you that in 2001 and even before then, that preparing the agendas and sending them out was done by the mayor's office. I have personal knowledge of that at that time since I was here in 2001, and I believe it carried over into 2002. So these were never these were never exclusively the city clerk's job duty, any of these. And they have never, there is no ordinance or state law that has ever assigned these to the city clerk. And they have been done at one time or another by people other than the city clerk.
In the history of this position, were there times that memos were sent out with directives, and were those memos ever taken back?
I'm not 100% sure. I mean, you're not giving me a reference point.
Well, if we
been
got a
plenty-
memo from a former mayor and then we got a verbal request to ignore those memos, is that anything that could have happened?
Without referencing the particular mayor, if you want me to make an assumption based on your question, then yes, it quite could have, and I had, if it's during the time period in which you speak, then it's quite possible, given the circumstances back at that time.
So both the mayor and the HR department head at that time verbally basically said ignore memos.
Possible, I do not know. I was not privy to any of.
You're not on trial, so that's just.
I know. I'm just saying I'm not privy to the conversations, nor was I included on probably the memo of which you speak.
Okay. Good deal. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other discussion?
Mayor, I'd like to move to amend Mr. Sims' motion to table this at this present time upon further consideration at the next monthly scheduled council meeting.
I'll second.
We have a motion, Mr. Tripp, and a second, Ms. Harris, to table this for another month.
But in the meantime, is it possible that we can have a special called meeting?
Mr. Mayor, a point of order, that would be discussion, and a table, motion and table is not debatable.
We debated it earlier this meeting.
It is debatable.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Okay. I stand corrected.
So could we potentially have a special call meeting to where we could have an executive session if we wanted to interview, question, whatever the right word is, specific and certain specifics, et cetera, employees?
If the council would be willing to communicate between now and that special called meeting specifically who they want invited to it, or would you rather we just leave it open and whoever wants to attend, or how do you want to do that?
Does Mr. Smith have a suggestion?
I'm not sure of the following, because if you want executive session, again, it's going to have to be a specific purpose falling under the 6 reasons for a particular employee. Plus, you may want to invite in that supervisor or also the head of the department, depending on what employee that is.
It will be employee matters, employee specific, but I believe, of course, we can't call more than one in at a time, right?
Right, but you've got to understand it's got to be specific and not over a policy such as the resolution, which was the genesis of this whole discussion.
It is very employee specific for, that can potentially lead to disciplinary action.
And for clarification, Mr. Smith, did you say supervisors or department heads?
Yes, the wording is the immediate supervisor and the top administrative person in the agency or department. Those are discretionary invitees. They
So
are
that would not be like coworkers?
No.
Thank you.
So yes, we can work that out. Any other discussion?
Would that be as a group or one at a time?
We are have a, we
One
have a
at a
motion
time.
from the Personnel Committee recommending this resolution, but we have an amendment to that from Mr. Tripp, seconded by Mrs. Harris, to table this until the December meeting. So at this point, we're voting on the motion to table. So I think you probably would be best served to just call the roll. We're voting on the motion to table for a month.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Ms. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Westcott?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Mr. Wiley?
Yes.
Mr. Sims?
No.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Tabled. Mr. Chairman, what other business do you have for us?
Well, that would conclude our business for this evening.
That will bring us to old business, item 1. Update on drainage and flow. Mr. Tripp?
Thank you, Mayor. And again, as I have the last couple of months, when the discussion's over, I'd like to intend to move this to table to the next meeting. Mr. Jones, would you like to give us an update on the drainage discussions, issues that we've been discussing for a few months now?
Well, we're moving forward with them. I mean, do you have specific questions?
Sure, I can do that. What about O in Arkansas?
Oh, in Arkansas is Arkansas Highway and Transportation Department, or RDOT now, is performing some additional studies based on a request from ATU on some drainage structures on their campus. So it's kind of in their court.
So what's next?
We're waiting on them to complete those studies.
Got any idea of time frame?
I mean, it's all up to them.
Do they do this in-house or do they hire that out?
No, they would do that in-house. They're hydraulics folks.
Okay. Then we discussed doing an overall update, new or update drainage plan, hydrology plan. Where are we on that?
Well, same place we were last month. I got a ballpark estimate. It would be between $450,000 and $950,000. I'm not real sure. We're talking about an 18 to 24 month study.
So my question on that following from last month's meeting would be, the way I understood you, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're talking about basically performing a whole new complete study in place of taking the previous study with the existing firm and expanding it.
It would be a whole new complete study. We're talking about, the level of detail that would be necessary to kind of to do what you're wanting to accomplish. The study that was done back in 2000 was just the major. It's a good study for the major tributaries, but that's not where these flooding issues that we're experiencing are.
Would there not be cost savings potentially to have that existing firm
I'm not
to
sure that we
expand
would want to restudy all that. So
what you're talking about, your 450 to 500,000 would not include that?
It's not necessarily, no. Not the major FEMA, the FEMA study drainage ways, no.
So you have a proposal back from someone?
No, I don't have a proposal. Is that a number that, y'all are willing to expend on something like this?
Well, Mr. Jones, tell me this. Drainage, as I think Mr. Westcott pointed out earlier, is not a new thing, nor is it going away. And so I have kind of taken this issue to heart because being born and raised, lived here my whole life, I don't know any better or any worse. So we always kick this can, we always put this off until we wrap our mind around and accept the point that we have a flooding problem, ongoing drainage, flooding, whatever it is, and we start a plan to attack this, and it's an every year process for the foreseeable future. Until that happens, I don't know that we're doing our job sitting up here.
Well, Okay, I mean,
But I'm only 12.5% of the vote.
we have, if that's the desire of the council and the mayor to move forward with this, I would be happy to get an actual proposal.
Do you have a better idea?
Well, I think that, let me say this, this is really an unprecedented approach based on conversations that I've had with other engineering firms. And, I mean, you know, we are addressing drainage issues as they arise on a case-by-case basis, and we'll continue to do so.
Well, we're addressing those when we have to apply pressure for people that get addressed. And so will this study identify areas of concern?
To a certain degree, yes.
Okay. Well, does anybody on the council have a better idea?
I don't know that I think spending $500,000 to find out that places in the city flood is very fiscally responsible when we get phone calls talking about the areas that are already flooding. I mean, everybody here in this room could point at 6 different areas that floods when it rains.
Yep.
I see crews of Kurt's out working all the time after we've had these discussions. Maybe they're not always working on drainage issues, but they're working on something. And so I'm not necessarily for spending $500,000 just to know where we flood. I want to fix the flooding issues, guaranteed.
As they come up.
We could be proactively seeking out those. I mean, we know, we just had a 40-year rain. I mean, it's not like we don't know where that's going to come from. We have people here tonight even who have said we have issues with this area and this area that Kurt has even worked with. So I don't know that I'm positively for spending a whole lot of money.
You could take that $400,000 and fix a couple of the drains.
We could fix a lot of drains with $500,000, yeah.
Mr. George, my question to you on that would be, we have a lot of streams, tributaries, creeks, whatever the right words are.
Yeah.
We have a 5-year master plan on our streets where streets are rated. Do we presently have that in our drainage system?
No, but
well, maybe identify, I'm asking broadly, I don't know what the right answer is, but maybe we need to look at a 10-year master plan, whether we determine it in-house. If we have a street master plan to overlay and maintain our streets, our flooding is not new, it's not going to go away. Maybe we need to develop in-house or out-house, outsource it to develop a master plan for our areas so that Mr. Walsh and the other people, it can be identified. We know, we can say, okay, we worked that area 4 years ago, it needs to be worked again. Instead of saying, oh, well, they called, we better go check on that.
Right. No, I'm not against a master plan that said, but I'm also, that sounds like Kurt's really working on that. I mean, he's worked on master plans before. I'm okay with.
Can you develop that, Mr. Jones?
Mm-hmm.
In-house, or do you need to outsource?
I would, most of it I could do in-house.
Okay. And I'm fine with that as long as we need a big picture plan.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to know,
well,
your predecessor, Mr. Oaks, I think, my opinion, did a great job on clearing out some of the creeks and so forth to allow the water to flow faster. He spent $200,000 on some specific areas, thinning and clearing.
And we maintain ditch clearing. I mean, we routinely, we have a schedule of ditch clearing that we do.
But before he did that, there's no telling how many years had gone by, decades probably, since that had been touched. And I know that's not your fault, not his fault, but that's what I don't want to happen again. And so that's why I keep hounding, keep asking these questions on how are we going to keep this from happening again.
Okay. I mean, we do continue to maintain the ditches and clear the ditches. Now, I think we need to get into a discussion about what is our ditch and what is not our ditch, because we don't have a clear-cut policy on that. In the past, we have gone out on private property. We have cleared ditches.
Can I interrupt you? Can you get a clear clear-cut policy on that? I know
I'm actually working on that right now. I've downloaded policies that other communities have, and I can tell you that typically, it's not untypical at all for a city to simply maintain what's in their right-of-way. That's what the county does. We go off our right-of-way in numerous locations and clear ditches.
Do we incur liability when we do that?
That would be a city attorney question. I would assume that we do to some extent, but we don't have a policy. I am in the process of gathering information and putting together a policy as far as an actual ditch maintenance and whose responsibility it is to clean, what ditches, and clear
Well, I would
them.
discourage us going very far on private property, because whatever you do upstream affects someone downstream, and if we don't go all the way down to the bottom, then you got people down there that are suing us because we increase the flow on them down below. So it's a very touchy thing when we start messing with private ditches and things, even though they may have a history there or whatever. This memo that was laid out, I guess someone was here to speak, and it looks like you did address that by cleaning out a culvert, and then you're going to put in a larger culvert.
Mm-hmm.
And that addressed the water that was coming from a private ditch. Did it not?
Well, no, I mean, the project I think the project you're talking about is over there on Vancouver. Is that?
Yeah, Whippoorwill.
Whippoorwill?
Yeah.
Well, we actually have a project that is actually being advertised this weekend to replace a structure under Vancouver.
Well, 12th Street's mentioned here.
12th Street.
Yeah, across from Seattle, yeah.
I'm not, okay. Well, the project that we have we have a structure that runs under Vancouver. It's the ditch that runs back behind the lots on Whippoorwill, and it runs under Vancouver and then along Vancouver for a stretch, but it is undersized. During the storm event back in August, we had a significant amount of water that ran down Vancouver and flooded Vancouver. The plan is to actually capture this water and divert it back into the detention basin to kind of help reduce some of that flooding down along Vancouver.
Which we do control it. We do control the retention basin.
The detention basin, well, we own the detention basin, right. Yes, that's correct. And we have an easement through most of that channel downstream, I believe.
Mr. Jones, back to your question on the, kind of a master plan, if you will, drainage. How long would it take you to develop something?
Well, I think, it probably, I could have something preliminary to y'all in a couple of months, and then at that point, y'all could work through it at that point.
I would like to see that,
Okay.
and see that as a yearly process, part of the street, sidewalk, et cetera, master plan, so that we know what areas, if somebody's got a concern or their area near their house, it's identified on there, and something we can all go by. I did receive a compliment about some work being done in the Honeysuckle area a couple weeks ago that I forwarded you the message. That resident was very appreciative of that. Any other areas that I've have forgotten to ask about specifically?
Just update on the 205 study. I have had some contact with the Corps of Engineers. They had planned a site meeting here sometime. I thought it was going to be this month. They haven't gotten back in touch with me and set a date, but they do. They've had some personnel changes since this project started, and they wanted to bring the design team down and kind of reintroduce them to me. But that meeting has not happened yet, but they are continuing to move forward on the design of the project.
I have recently been contacted by another one that I believe that, you know, you guys have been in contact with, but the new CVS project, some nearby landowners have been concerned about some water issues coming off of that project. Has all that been addressed, or what?
I mean, it's, from my standpoint, it's been addressed. Now, I don't know, I think that they're working with the adjoining property owner, but they're not diverting any water onto them.
Okay. No water at all?
No, I mean, the way their site's graded, I mean, it's, yeah, there's no water being diverted over onto them.
The piping work that was done out there today, it looked like on the east side of their property, is that city piping in through there?
On the east, no, they're not doing any public, I mean, they're not even on a public, they're not on a city street, they're on a state highway, anything that.
So is there a city court project going in there? Would that be a sewer line improvement through there possibly?
Well, there's some storm drain being done. I mean, I don't know. There's probably storm drain and sanitary sewer. I'm not sure what you saw.
Mr. Walsh, I would give you the opportunity if you have anything to add or ask in this discussion.
I don't have anything to ask. I have a presentation to come.
Okay, Mayor, would this be the time, or does that need to be?
He signed up to speak. If
Okay.
you would, step to the microphone, identify yourself for the record.
My name is A.J. Walsh, W-A-L-S-H.
Go ahead.
Ready? Okay. My name is A.J. Walsh, and I reside at 1006 South Tulsa Avenue. Since 2011, stormwater that originates from streets east of Tulsa frequently floods my neighborhood. In 6 years, I've experienced over 27 incidents of stormwater overtopping the curb in front of my yard. Significant and damaging water has flooded my yard at least 8 times. 3 of the events were severe, with stormwater rising into the brick foundation of my house each time and getting into my garage on 2 occasions. Multiple annual flooding events have left tree debris and trash amassed against my house, yet my lot has no trees. I've spent literally hundreds of hours hosing off my driveway. This problematic underground stormwater system is owned, operated, and maintained by the city of Russellville. Since 2014, stormwater from over 12 blocks of streets outside the Brookview subdivision has been piped underground into Brookview from the mid-block of 1100 South Seattle between 4 houses to a drop basin on South Tulsa. This drain system has been altered at least twice since the Deer Run subdivision was platted. The latest 2014 diversion collates with the increased frequency of flooding in my yard and neighborhood. On September 6th, I provided photos to this council documenting significant flooding in 2013, 2014, and August 15, 2017. The 2013 flooding followed a 5-inch rainfall. In the 2014 followed an overnight rain of 7 inches, and on August 15th followed a 2-hour rainfall that was measured to be 4.4 inches at a location approximately 300 feet from my home. Mr. Jones knows of that rainfall measurement on August 15th. Allow me to diverge a moment here and point out that Mr. Jones, at the last council meeting, informed you that the airport monitoring station recorded a 5.5-inch rainfall on August 15th, and that the most intense portion of that rainfall exceeded the projection 1% rain or 100-year rain, Russellville rainfall standard of 3.7 inches that was projected in an outdated 1961 U.S. Weather Bureau document titled Technical Paper Number 40. He didn't tell you that engineers must consider more factors than peak rainfall when determining epic flood events. You have a highlighted email there, and I numbered some things. So let's talk about what Mr. Jones failed to tell you last council meeting. He's publicly acknowledged, number one, that a small failure of the city-maintained culvert located on 12th at the extension of Seattle during the August 15th flood. He stated on that date he observed, number two, a tremendous amount of flow crossing 12th Street. And we believe that this significantly increased the flow in the area behind your home. He's speaking about Ms. Everhart's home. Further, Mr. Jones alludes to new subdivision development at that area, and he told me directly that his August 15th personal observation of the area there, it noted that there was no flood or erosion fencing in place at the new development. So 1 month after Mr. Jones implied to you that the August 15th rainfall caused a 100-year flood, you find out tonight he was being deceptive and that it is actually impossible for him to determine the flooding was solely caused by the brief heavy rainfall. He was deceptive because he did not fully compute the flood data required to measure a flood. He failed to mention the Department of Public Works' negligent disregard in maintaining a culvert, and he took no responsibility for his personal disregard of requiring erection of erosion fencing authorized in accordance with Ordinance 1675. By the way, that ordinance statement purpose is to protect, maintain, and enhance the public health, safety, and general welfare, and to control the adverse effects of increased stormwater associated with both future land development and existing land development. On August 15th, the developer of the center had no ADEQ permit or permit application, no flood erosion control abatement. The city engineer's only response to my personal August 16th complaint and request for further relief was to inform me that he had asked the developer to erect control fencing, which was only accomplished 31 hours after the flood event released a copious amount of extremely heavily silted water, stormwater, into my neighborhood. Mr. Jones and Junior Marple told neighbors asking for help that there was nothing the city could do to improve drainage and that the city did not have an easement on the ditch between Tulsa and Vancouver. When neighbors told the city engineer there indeed was an easement at that ditch location and cited multiple city maintenance events in the past, Jones repeatedly denied neighbors' requests, stating there is no easement, until City Attorney Smith told him he was wrong. Most of you and 15 Brookview residents witnessed this at the September 6th special meeting. On August 27th, number 3 on the highlighted memo or email, the city engineer public acknowledged a proper drainage conveyance system had not been constructed when the city accepted the dedication of Brookview Estate subdivision easements in 1993. To date, he has told citizens he is only considering moving forward with connecting the 18-block drainage system directly to the Waco Basin. Tonight is the first time I heard he's going to let bids on it. On August 15th, 2017, flood in Brookview flooded the interior of one house for the second time since 2014. $22,000 in damage occurred in 2014. August 15th, floodwaters also entered 2 additional home garages, flooding one severely. Another home had sinkholes develop in the backyard from the force of the ditch water, passing behind and over the yard to the street in front. 4 other Whippoorwill residents came within a few inches of floodwaters entering their homes. The water again overtopped my curb, at its peak measuring 15 inches deep at the gutter. 5 other homes were endangered by fully flooded yards. Another 26 houses had nasty, silty water and charcoal from the new development rise to significant levels in their yards. 12th Street, South Seattle Avenue, South Tulsa Avenue, and South Vancouver Avenue were impassable to vehicles for 90 minutes. On November 2013, I was told by then city engineer David Oakes that the city was indeed responsible for the maintenance of the ditch behind the Whippoorwill houses. Mr. Oakes had the ditch immediately dredged and placed on an annual maintenance list. He left less than a year later. It is beyond reasonableness that an entire subdivision platted and accepted by the city in 1993 with the recurrent problems I describe here would not receive attention without a delay from this council, or that a fight would be necessary with the Department of Public Works for citizens to even be heard when damaging flooding occurs repeatedly and is getting worse. You were given documents detailing the drainage corrections needed on September 6th. Now I urge you to tell Mr. Jones to fix it and fix it all. Putting a larger pipe along Vancouver will help Vancouver. The flooding will continue to occur upstream of that if nothing else is done. The problem is the pipes aren't big enough to handle the water all the way to where it's coming from, not just at the end. I get that. The pipe has to be increased at the end before the others are increased. But it is not a solution to the flooding in my yard, and it's certainly not a solution to the flooding in Mr. Howell's yard, that be the only thing done, or his house rather, not his yard. Drainage funding from the 1-cent sales tax appears to be at an all-time high. If you delay any further, Mr. Jones will too. And then you will allow him the chance to reuse the old and often repeated Department of Public Works excuse that there's no funding available for maintenance. I've heard that 6 or 7 times since 2011. Now it's been more than 90 days since Mr. Hall's home was flooded for the second time by stormwater directed onto his property by a city-owned drainage system, and nothing has changed. Thank you for your 6 minutes of time. My question for you is, when shall I expect proper renovations to commence? Thank you.
Is that all, Mr. Tripp?
Mayor,
Anybody else?
well, Mr. Jones, so is this area that Mr. Walsh speaks of, is this in a continual review, continual improvement type process right now?
The issue with the ditch remains, it's not an easement. If they're willing to provide an easement necessary to fix that ditch.
You know better. We can't get you on record.
I mean, the ditch that he's talking about is not, I mean, we maintain it, we clear it, but it's too small. And, I mean, that whole, I mean, they're asking us to go over onto another property owner and, I guess, condemn property to enlarge a ditch. The other option would be for the property owners along Whippoorwill to provide additional easements, and we could make some drainage improvements in that area.
So is that something you need Mr. Smith to prepare paperwork on, or Mr. Smith, how does this move off of High Center?
Well, if you're wanting to acquire a property, then you're going to have to authorize condemnations, and then I think even before that, Kurt would have to provide a plat of the property to condemn, then you're going to have to authorize me to do it. We're going to have to get an appraiser if that's what you're wanting to do.
Are we condemning or just getting easements?
You can get easements, but it's dependent upon the property owners, and if they're not willing to do it, then you're stuck. Then you cannot improve private property.
Let's just anticipate that they're willing to give the easement. So is that something you need to provide the paperwork to Mr. Jones on, or is that something he takes care of himself, or how do we move this?
Well, the first thing you're going to do is find out and get a legal description of the property that's going to be dedicated.
Okay. Who does that?
A surveyor usually does that. Somebody at Public Works will have to get the surveyor an aerial of what their general location is and what they want to get dedicated to the city so that they can then in turn improve it. That'll have to be then surveyed, and then an easement can be drawn up and given to all the property owners, and then they can sign it. And if they don't sign it, or all of them sign it, then at some point, to make the whole project work, you're going to have to condemn those areas that the people did not sign over willingly. Otherwise, if you have parcels that are not signed over, then there's no point in doing the project, because if you can't do the whole project, then it's going to fail.
So, Mr. Jones, would that be your department initiating that step? Would that be a step in the right?
Yeah, I mean, yes. Now, keep in mind, and I've said this before, the first time I heard about this problem was August 15th. We had a phenomenal rainfall event, and despite what Mr. Walsh says, I mean, I do know what I'm talking about when I talk about the severity of this rainfall event. And I don't appreciate some of the comments that he made.
I know you just said, well, you just
I mean,
said that August 15th is the first time you've heard of this.
That's,
then you just said that you know that the city's done work before, so
No. I said that I know the city has done work in ditches on private property before. I had no real knowledge of that ditch. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, that ditch wasn't on my radar before August 15th.
The city has done.
The city has done work on that ditch prior to my employment with the city. But I don't have a solution drawn up for that project yet.
Okay.
I mean, where do you want me to prioritize that? Put that on my priority list. We've got other projects that we're working on trying to get completed right now. I mean, I can drop everything and do this one. Is that, I mean...
Well, we've been talking about this 3 or 4 months now.
Exactly.
In the same area. And so I'm asking, when do you see this moving? When do you see...
I can't predict right now. I mean, it's... I really don't have a schedule for it.
Okay.
I mean, I've got projects that I've been working on for over a year right now. This one came on my radar August 15th.
This one was, as well as some others in this area, or in general, from the August 15th rainfall.
Well, this was the only new one that I'm aware of that I wasn't aware of before.
Okay. So would it be feasible to say in 60 days you think you might have that moving forward in some form or fashion?
Do you want another a drainage project over there? I mean, we are working on this. You work on a drainage project on the downstream end, and you work upstream. I can have something in 60 days.
Well, my point is I'm just trying to hear the residents and make sure their concerns are heard. And if there's a drainage issue, I think multiple council members have sat up here tonight and said drainage is a priority. And I'm getting tired of having the same conversation 4 months in a row. And so
we're not going to fix it in 4 months. I mean,
I don't expect that we
I think it seems like the expectation was that it was going to be fixed. We are working towards fixing it.
Okay.
We're continually working towards fixing it. That and other problems in the city, not only drainage related, but other citywide issues that we deal with on a day-to-day basis.
So you think in maybe 60 days you'll have something moving on this?
Sure. Okay. I mean, wait, 60. You want? What do you want in 60 days? I guess
maybe more progress than we've had on this one in the last 4 months.
We haven't had any progress. Is that what you're saying? I mean, I just told you that we advertised a project this weekend that will address some of that issue over there.
Okay. Upstream or downstream?
It's on the downstream end, but obviously the downstream. I mean, if you open up the downstream, the water is going to have a place to go. If it doesn't have a place to go, it's going to cause flooding issues and go through yards.
Is it going to entail private property?
No, this project that we've bid does not involve private property. It's all on our right-of-way.
So when do you perceive that their issues will be, that you'll be able to start work on?
I'm working on it right now. I'm trying to explain that's the first step.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, this is a continuous process.
And I understand that.
I'm not going to solve the city's drainage problems in 60 days.
Didn't expect that you would.
Well, then are you saying that there has been no progress whatsoever on drainage improvements in the last 4 months?
No, Mr. Jones, that's not what I said.
Then that is what you said.
No, Mr. Jones, this specific conversation of Mr. Walsh's concerns is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And so let me make this real clear, okay? And your tone in the last 30 seconds of your minute has put me to this point, so I'll make that clear. All right, you're very quick to tell the residents of this city no, that we can't do it or why.
No, I've never told the citizens no.
Mr. Mayor, is there not something, point of order, something we can move this meeting on? We still have 6 agenda items under new business that we haven't even addressed.
Mr. Sims, if you need to go, then go ahead and go.
I'm not leaving, Mr. Tripp, but I do not like the interrogation that you put Mr. Jones under this evening.
By asking questions?
Did you ask for a point of order, Mr. Sims?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Smith?
At what time do we
Can you
cease
advise us,
discussion?
are we in order or out of order?
I believe that point. There's, I think, 10 minutes for the, or maybe it's 5 that for an alderman to speak, and then he's supposed to yield the floor if anyone else wants to speak about anything on this issue.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Sims?
I'm fine with tabling it and having asking the same question next month. So I'll make a motion to table.
Second. Well, before we get that, would you mind if we ask if anybody else has something they want to discuss, or
Have you worked on Independence Street? Have you worked on Independence Street? Have you worked on Independence Street yet?
No.
Okay, I'll ask you next month.
anybody else? Now, Mr. Tripp, do you want to make a motion to table?
Motion to table till next month.
Second.
Second, Mr. Westcott. All in favor of tabling till next month? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Was there a no?
Yes.
There's a couple of no's. Go ahead and call the roll.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Mr. Westcott?
Yes.
Ms. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
No.
Ms. Caruth?
No.
Mr. Wiley?
Yes.
Mr. Sims?
No.
Mr. George?
Yes.
5-3.
To table. Okay. Motion to table passes. That'll bring us to new business number 1. Consideration of an ordinance to approve rezoning for property.
Make a motion to suspend the rules and read title only with short explanation.
Second.
We have a motion to suspend, read one time by title only, short explanation. That's seconded by Mr. Westcott. All in favor of the motion to suspend, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
In order to rezone certain realty in the city of Russellville, Arkansas, and for other purposes, this ordinance, if passed, would rezone property currently R1 to R2S located at 507 East 11th Street, Russellville, Arkansas, as further described in the attachment labeled Exhibit A, attached and incorporated in this ordinance by reference.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Motion to adopt, Mr. Wiley, second, Mr. Westcott. Is there discussion? Would you call the roll?
Mr. Wiley?
Yes.
Mr. Westcott?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Ms. Caruth?
Yes.
Mr. Sims?
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Ms. Harris?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Mayor, is there a need for the emergency clause on this?
I do not know. Thank you, Mr. Garza. There is none, so let's move on. Item 2 is also an ordinance to approve the plat for Shiloh Manor Phase 6.
Make a motion to suspend the rules, read title only, short explanation.
One time.
One time.
Second.
Motion, Mr. Wiley, to suspend the rules one time, read one time by title only, short explanation. Seconded, Mr. Westcott. All in favor of the motion to suspend, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, suspended, Mr. Smith.
An ordinance accepting the final plat of Shiloh Manor Phase 6A North subdivision, accepting the dedication of the easements to the city of Russellville, Arkansas, and for other purposes. This ordinance, if passed, would accept the final plat of the Shiloh Manor Phase 6A North subdivision as made by the plat that is incorporated with this ordinance. It's labeled as Exhibit A and is further described in the legal attached to Exhibit B. It will accept all the easements and dedications shown on the plat herein.
Mayor, I got a question for Bucky.
All right. Mr. Croom, would you stick to the microphone? You're going to be asked a question. State your name for the record, please.
My name is Bucky Croom. I'm the developer of Shiloh Manor Phase 6.
Mr. Grooms, I want to know what's going to happen to the mud that's coming down from the mountain behind, the hill behind your subdivision. Are you going to be able to stop that?
Yes, there's, you know, in this new phase, every phase, when you make a development, there's obviously fresh dirt that's created as part of our development. We're in the process of stabilizing that. There's been stabilization that's been working, has been extremely dry. So now that we've had some rain, there should be quite a bit of vegetation that's going to be coming up in that area, and that should be stabilized very soon.
Thank you. Motion to adopt.
Second. Okay, any other discussion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor of ordinance, any? Call the roll.
Mr. Wiley?
Yes.
Mr. Westcott?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Ms. Carruth?
Yes.
Mr. Sims?
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Ms. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Do you have a need for the emergency clause? All right. Item 3, consideration of an ordinance to approve amending the Russellville zoning code for El Paso's the University zoning district.
Move to suspend the rules and read one time by title only with a short explanation.
Could I amend that to, for discussion first for some questions pertaining to this?
Can, if he wants to, if that's the motion and is accepted. You can
So
make
is that a motion?
I'll second his motion.
Let's see, first, I guess we got to get a second to Eric's motion.
I got a second from Eric.
All right,
Eric's.
we got a second on Eric's motion.
Now we
Sorry,
discuss.
I apologize, Mr. Westcott's motion. Mr. Tripp,
I was
Would you
contacted.
restate your motion?
Motion to just amend that for discussion first before reading and going into adopting, just for
Do we need
clarification.
that, or if we can do discussion?
I just want to discuss it before we start reading and adopting.
Why do you want to amend their motion?
To discuss it first.
Well, why don't you just ask them to withdraw it and do your motion to discuss or informal discussion? And then that way we can get clean.
Is that okay?
Can we not discuss it after we do that?
No, because this may pertain to how it's done.
Well, in that case, I'll withdraw my motion for now.
Motion to discuss.
I don't know.
I was contacted today by someone that,
I'm sorry, Mr. Westcott, was that a second?
Correct.
I was contacted by someone today that is within this zoning district. And they were a little bit concerned because in this zoning district that was done for the university, they're not opposed to it, they're concerned. This zoning district was done kind of for the benefit of the university, but the university doesn't own all the property within this zoning district at this point in time. Okay? And so what happens if it affects their use of their property?
That's good.
So I don't know that this doesn't need to be read a few times to allow some due diligence in this process.
Can the property owners that's on El Paso, can they not come back? If we rezone this tonight, they can come back as individuals and rezone their property?
But you're rezoning it from their property, what their property is right now anyway, so why are you gonna rezone their property and make them come back and rezone it back?
Okay, I see.
That makes sense.
So, just for my own clarification, is there a need, is there a need right now to take care of this, or should we wait until Arkansas Tech actually owns most, if not all, of the property in question?
Read it one of 3 times instead of one time only.
Well, again, what I'm saying is there a need to address this right now? With there being a lot of individual property owners through that area? Is there,
If you step to the microphone, please, identify yourself for the record and help us straighten this out.
Probably not, he's probably scared.
My name is Roger Boskus. I'm with Miller Boskus Slack Architects. Our firm was hired about a year and a half ago to essentially do a a master plan or a planning process for just the El Paso corridor. So it was just to kind of give you a little bit of background about this. And this was a joint venture between, really the city and Arkansas Tech. So I do want to, make clear that we were doing what is in the best interests of the city of Russellville. This wasn't really aimed at doing one thing for Tech or one thing for any one individual. So this is really an extension of your master plan. So the intent all along is to kind of create a walkable corridor from Tech to downtown. So you guys have a fantastic downtown. Our public input sessions over the year and a half were extensive. I can kind of read a really quick list of some of the things that we had done, but we talked with business leaders affiliated with Main Street, city staff. These are all different workshops that we had. Community leaders, neighbors, students, faculty, administration, trustees. These are all separate, workshops that we held over years. And then planning staff, Main Street. We did a separate workshop for the city of Russellville's Planning Commission, and it passed unanimously after getting tabled once and then going back to Planning Commission again. We gave a presentation to Main Street, and there was a street party, a pop-up, a bike ride, and I think last but not least was an open workshop on El Paso, where we set up our design studio in eTech for 2 days, invited all these folks to come in and have input and part of the process. So it's something that, we want to circumvent bad development in this area, and that's really the point of this, is to create walkability, so as things get developed in the future, that you don't get, not to pick on, say, a gas station, because we all need gas stations, but it would be a travesty to have that kind of a non-pedestrian use kind of get dropped right in the middle of El Paso. We want to encourage great walkable development in the future. So that's just a little bit of background.
So what about the people that owns the lots that's not going to sell to Tech, that wants to build duplexes or something down through there?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
What about the landowners that owns land on El Paso that wants to build a duplex or a triplex or whatever?
Yeah.
What
So
about that?
It doesn't, there's not, okay, so if you look through the zoning ordinance, and if I'm not sure if you've had time to kind of read through that, but it addresses all the uses allowed in the different districts. So as you get closer to downtown, the uses change, and as you get closer, say, to campus, the uses change. But I don't believe that use is prevented, in our, but I don't want to say that with 100% certainty without having it right in front of me to read. Yeah.
Have all the landowners in this area been contacted in person?
No, not to my knowledge, and that wasn't our responsibility for doing that. So, I don't know that one of the residents mentioned to me, just Mr. I didn't get your name. I'm sorry. Vance mentioned that he did not receive a letter in the mail, so that wasn't part of our responsibility to do that. It was part of the, I don't know.
Do we know whose responsibility that was supposed to be?
I don't know if it was required to be done, honestly, so that was.
If that's a true statement, then that answers everything I need to know, and I'm just going to make a motion to table this.
There was a question, I believe, when you rose up about the need to get this done in a timely fashion. Can you explain timeline?
Explain timeline. So the biggest, it's been, okay, so I do want to say that, if you're on the spot, you got to do something, the answer is always no, right? So that's always like an easy thing. So it's not like absolutely hair on fire necessity, but the longer that we wait to do this, the longer that you run the risk of somebody doing something that is counterintuitive to the development that is intended as part of the planning process. I don't think anything, in this ordinance or in this new zoning district will be a negative impact on any of the property owners. If anything, it's going to raise their value. So that's an important, and I think that's why the consideration by the Planning Commission was so strong.
Would it be prudent to give the courtesy of the current landowners before we start this process that we're going to start rezoning their property? I mean, that makes sense to me. that if you're gonna come rezone my property, I think you need to notify me in writing, or, you know, some type of process to notify me of it, that you're processing, taking the steps to rezone my property.
I will say that the
And I'm not, that's
public,
not towards
yeah,
you.
yeah, I
just
know,
mean-
I know you're not. But I do want to really point out that the public input process on this entire project over a year and a half was very laborious and very open and transparent. I think everybody had ample opportunity to know about it. So I don't think there was anything that was
Sir,
keeping people in the dark.
there was one landowner here tonight, or property owner here tonight, that has 3 properties up along El Paso, and he didn't know nothing about it.
Yeah.
He didn't know why it was being rezoned or how it was going to affect him. So I'd have to counteract your statement there. Everybody hasn't been notified.
Yeah.
It's not their responsibility to come to a meeting to be notified that we're gonna rezone their property.
I agree.
And again, that's not, what I would like to see is table this and somebody take the initiative to send everybody something in writing between now and our next meeting so that they have fair due diligence in this process.
Whose responsibility is it to notify them?
I don't know.
There
Who's
are
seeking-
public signs up about ordinances and rezoning for other things. And, I mean,
Is it on
nobody
their
just gets a
property?
letter every time.
Is it on their property that we're gonna rezone their property?
Was none of this done at the planning commission level or prior to the planning commission level where all of this information was brought to the planning commission? Was no notification sent before that even happened?
I mean, this project's been going on for a long time. I mean, it shocks me that property owners on El Paso don't know
They
about it.
didn't know. He
So,
told me he didn't. He had.
I mean, of all of the development that's been going on El Paso for the last years, with the construction on the walkways and, you know.
If we do not know for certain that the landowners were notified even before the planning commission process, then I would say, if that was a motion, Mr. Tripp, I would second Mr. Tripp's motion to table this. Was that a motion?
Yes.
Then I'm seconding that.
Just because we owe that to the residents and the landowners.
So who
before
can
we
answer
take
whether
action.
they were notified or not?
No one can, so let's table it till we find
Well,
out.
And in this process, identify who's going to do the notification.
Mr. Vance?
I was not notified, and Leon Anderson was here, his wife, on half of Kaufman's Corner, her sister is John Kaufman. And they own the grandmother property back behind where the house was torn down, and the rent house next door, so that may be the 3 properties you were talking about. He was here and had to leave. He didn't know anything about it till I called him and told him they were planning on putting a building up in parking lot where Kaufman's Corners is. And I called the Wesley Foundation when I noticed they were planning on putting a building across over the street from Wesley. They own 2 houses and a parking lot. They had 3 houses and tore one down for parking. And eventually they'll probably tear the other 2 down for parking. Wesley needs more parking than it's got. And if Tech, see what some of us don't know is whether Tech's going to have the right of eminent domain and take our property. And we don't know what a university zone is anyway. You know, what is it being zoned to? We know commercial and residential, things like that, but I've never run across a university zone. Now, I was originally told Tech was wanting everything between Arkansas Avenue and El Paso. This is just going over to Denver. Now, 5 years from now, maybe they're going to want the rest of it. And they're going to have, well, we've already got started over here. We've got to have the other part. Now, my grandparents got married in 1917, which is 100 years ago. And in May of this year, they bought, May of 1917, they bought the house I've been living in for the last 45 years. And my kids are the 5th generation to live there. My grandmother's father came to live with them for a while after his wife died. So, you know, 5 generations in the same house, and then find out that they can take it away from you to tear it down because a state institution needs place for another dormitory. I haven't heard anything mentioned about that tonight as to whether that's going to be a possibility, or even what the university zone is going to mean. Now, right now, my house is oddly zoned. When they put Arkansas Avenue through there and zoned it all commercial along there, they zoned 3 lots over. The east half of my house has been zoned commercial for several decades, and the west half is residential. And I've got a rent house across the street that I have a lot and a third, and the lot is commercial, and the third is residential. It's parking. But anyway, I don't know what they're going to do to any of this stuff. My grandfather had this house. His younger brother had the house across the street, and I own it too. But and we did not get any letters. Nobody got any kind of, I don't know how many times people came in the title company wanting us to figure out who owns within so many feet of this lot they're wanting to rezone. And I'd give them names and send them over to the courthouse, the tax office, and they'll give you the addresses and send out whatever they had to mail out. Nothing like that has happened on this. And as I say, I called 2 people today and they didn't know anything about it.
They did.
Leon Anderson and the director out at Wesley Foundation. Anyway, that's all. I knew about it because it has been in the paper, but it still hadn't explained enough to me, especially if they're going to be able to take everything by eminent domain, what doesn't sell. So, okay, that's all I have on that.
We got a motion and a second?
Yes, we do. Any other discussion?
Let me just say, I thought they always sent out letters when they were rezoning property. So did something fall through the crack? The planning commission, I thought, did. I thought they posted the signs, remember your little nursing home deal? I mean, they notified everybody within a range that they were changing the zones.
Somebody's wanting to speak, Mayor.
Would you like to enlighten us, Dr. Wood?
Sure. My name is Jeff Woods. I'm the Dean of Arts and Humanities at Arkansas Tech University. I want to, best I can, express what the intention of the university is in this. Sure. The university's real intent with this is recruitment and retention of students, providing them with opportunities and amenities that connect the downtown to the university. The intention has not, from what I've seen, been to buy up property, take over property. What we're looking for is a partnership with the city to develop this part of town so that we can have places for students to live, apartments, places where they can eat. It's an opportunity for the city to help develop some areas that can really use our students, right? Give them things that they need, right? And also provide some development for the city. The idea of the zoning, from what I understand about it, is to provide a kind of walkable corridor and places where we can maybe have some ground floor shops, maybe some offices, maybe some other kinds of things, like places where you can have incubators and business incubators and innovation centers and that sort of thing. That's the intention of the university. It's not to buy up property, put people out of their homes. It's a coordinated, cooperative opportunity. And I mean, that's the best I can express what the university's position is on this. Thanks.
Mr. Jones, do you know if notice was put out, a sign or whatever, or?
This wasn't I'm not sure how to explain this. I wasn't involved in the notification process, but this wasn't a, I mean, this isn't a typical rezoning. It's gone through a completely different process than a rezoning. You know, and I don't recall what all the public hearings and meetings were related to this, but you know, and I don't know if, again, you know, our office wasn't involved in sending out notifications. Normally, the petitioner would send out the notifications, but this is really being driven more from a city standpoint than, you know, and James Walden was the one that was really involved in this. I wasn't that directly involved in it, so I don't know. But it is a different process than a typical rezoning. And there's been a lot more involved in this than a typical rezoning. Yeah, it's similar to adoption of the master plan. I mean, that's more the process that this has gone through versus a rezoning process.
The development of El Paso not part of the master plan, the downtown master plan, wasn't it?
It is included in the downtown master plan, and I think you know, and that was one of the aspects of, you know, prior to this was incorporating, you know, this zoning district into that master plan as well. You know,
Can I say something? Since I'm sort of familiar about the downtown master plan, I recall that we had the master plan, and within that master plan, there were still C4s and some other codes that didn't, you know, they didn't force everybody to be one code. They could still stay as they were with their example, the Bill Peters parking lot there on, that metal building on El Paso, that has a different zone than everything around it, as I recall. The building that gives us fits from time to time with the garage, it's more of an M1 or something.
Yeah.
But sometimes when these master plans are done, and even in the downtown area, they have some zones within the zones that not everything is rezoned. The master plan, is it required when the master plan and it changes, it has to go to what is set up at that point?
No, and let me clarify.
I don't think so.
For one thing, the existing uses of the property that, you know, in my understanding of the document is the existing uses could continue.
Yes, that's what I thought.
But what this document does is it basically establishes new zoning districts within the city, and it's identified these areas. Now, if the property were to redevelop, then it would have to redevelop in compliance with these new.
It's when redevelopment happens that it has to comply.
Exactly. Now, as far as existing use, whatever, you know, Mr. Peters' warehouse down there, I mean, that could continue to be used as a warehouse until. You know, until such time that he decides to redevelop that property or sell it. But
can I ask you something here? This is educational. This is not confrontational.
Okay. Well,
let's say Mr. Vance's home is R1. You said it was mixed, but you're residential 1, and he wants to put in apartments. Would he be allowed to do that?
Well, you can't put apartments in R1.
I know, but he gets his property rezoned himself. Is he allowed to rezone his property?
He is absolutely, even after this takes place. I mean, he has the same options that any property owner in the city would have as far as rezoning property. They could petition to have their own property rezoned to anything. Now, whether or not, you know, the Planning Commission and you as the City Council would ultimately approve that.
Now I'm going to throw out a real kicker. Okay, I was thinking when we did the master plan for downtown and stuff, that area, when they did that, it actually, for future, almost enhanced their property and allowed it almost as a protected piece of land. Am I thinking that kind of correct, more correct?
Now, rephrase your question, because I'm not sure I understood.
I've never been able to rephrase
If
it.
you're asking, do I think that this
It's a protected
is
area.
going to enhance the property
Yes,
that it
that's what I'm
affects?
asking you.
I mean, absolutely, I think it will. I think that this is going to, you know, my personal opinion is that this is going to drive, you know, increased property values in the area.
That's what I thought. That's all I had.
What's that?
Mhm.
Okay, so where are we?
Motion and second. Table.
To table.
And to establish who's going to do the notification between now and then.
Okay, so we got a motion and a second to table. And then go back and notify the property owners that we'll be discussing it at the county, at the council again.
That there's a proposal to rezone their property. I mean, I think any property owner would want to know that.
Okay, everybody clear on what we're talking about?
I think.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
I believe there was one no. No. Two no's. Let's call the roll then.
Mr. Tripp,
Yes.
Mr. Westcott,
Yes.
Ms. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
No.
Ms. Caruth,
Yes.
Mr. Wiley,
Yes.
Mr. Sims,
Yes.
Mr. George.
No.
Motion carries.
All right, tabled. Where's that get us to? Number 4?
Yes, sir.
Midnight.
Resolution to approve the downtown master plan updates.
Motion.
Second.
I hear a motion, Mr. Wiley, and a second, Mr. George. Any discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
On page 15 of 37, this is under the part of the original recommendations in regard to Main Street. In the middle column down there on the bottom part of the page, where it recommends Main Street being road dieted from 4 lanes down to 3, I sincerely hope that we're not serious about that. But that was in the original recommendations that I assume were already approved by someone.
It's supposed to be taken out.
Page 17 of 37. Now these are highlighted in red, part of the updated recommendations. In the left-hand column, about halfway down, it says the posted speed limit for Arkansas Avenue is 35 miles an hour. Although its state designation may preclude this idea, efforts should be pursued to reduce it to 30. And again, I hope that we would really look at that before we change the speed limit on Arkansas Avenue to 30 miles an hour.
On Arkansas Avenue or
We're
Main?
talking about Main
That's-
Street.
Well, I mean,
Highway
this,
64.
on page 17 of 37, the posted speed limit for Arkansas Avenue is 35, ... Efforts should be pursued to reduce it to 30. Is that not talking about Arkansas Avenue, since it just said Arkansas Avenue right there in the top part of that
It's talking
paragraph?
about the downtown area, though, between Second and Parkway. In that area. I mean, it starts out at 45. I see what you're talking about with that first paragraph. It says Arkansas Avenue is 35 miles per hour.
And so the advantage of lowering that down to 30 would be what?
Safer pedestrian zones.
well, of all of this that I've read, and there's a whole lot to it that's in red as far as the updated recommendations that we're considering tonight. This is the one thing that stands out to me in hopes that we would not go forward with this particular paragraph. Unless someone can explain it to me in a way that would make me see it from a different perspective.
These are just recommendations, and these are things that the Downtown Association and those who care about what goes on in that area are not necessarily going to try to make happen, but they're recommendations to pursue. So some of these, and it's over a long period of time, some of these have been brought up and said, no, we don't want to do that, so they didn't pursue them. So if they did come, this is not saying that we have to change the speed limit as a city council to 30 miles an hour. It's just saying that it's something that as this group who reviewed our downtown said it might be a good idea to.
Well, the reason I ask is that if we look at the resolution, the front page of this resolution, it says that under the now therefore be it ordered by the city council, number, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are all very, very important. Especially number 2 said the updated downtown master plan is hereby approved and adopted by the city council, which would, I assume, include everything that's been updated or the proposed updates in here. That implementation of this updated master plan will be carried out by the Department of Public Works according to a proposed schedule in Section 4, and that Section 5 says this resolution will go into effect immediately upon our passage tonight.
Mr. Smith, does the city control the speed limits on a state highway in the city? Or does the state highway department determines that?
The state controls their state highways,
Okay, Highway 7, state highway.
Yeah, we can't really change
but all everything else.
That's what that says.
So that particular paragraph has
no
we
meaning.
can disregard that paragraph entirely.
Yeah, because
Okay.
the state controls the speed limit.
Can,
Same way with State Highway 64 and 7, we don't repave it. State Highway does.
sure.
We don't maintain it.
And the part about the road diet of crunching that down from 4 lanes to 3, that's not in our jurisdiction to do
That's
that?
State Highway.
Okay.
I thought they
State
took
highway
that out.
controls it.
I thought they took that out. I think they just misprinted that.
They removed the backing in parking spaces, I believe, is what was
Yeah.
removed.
Mayor, can we vote on this?
You can. Would you like to amend the lane diet thing or deal with it if and when it should ever come up? If it does.
I don't think it'll
It's
ever
gonna
come
be
up because it's
implemented
state
before
highway.
we won't vote on it, that's the problem.
Well,
Sorry, Mr. Tripp.
If you pass this, the administration and Public Works Department implements it, so it would happen before the council ever knows it or votes on it again. It will have already happened.
It says in the plan, what it says is, if we have the option to. If the state controls the speed limit or also the people that work at Public Works are not idiots. So
We don't
if
have
the
the control.
state controls that situation, then our
But the
Public Works
city,
people aren't gonna make those changes.
the city requested of them.
Don't matter how much they requested, they can't do it.
It can be requested.
Can I
It
ask
happen.
Kurt another question? I don't think you, I
Is this
think.
about the speed limit?
No, it's about the master plan in general for downtown, like the bulb outs and them always trying to change things and stuff like that. Most of that comes back to the city, does it not?
It would. I mean, the state would be very, most any changes that would take place on the state highways in the downtown area, excuse me, would be city-driven. And I think that, the two things that I heard that are being discussed are the speed limit and the possible lane diet. I think in both those cases, if the city, well, particularly the speed limit, I think the state lets us request and within reason determine speed limits through the city. So
It's a city and state working together at that
yeah, I
point.
mean the state has some criteria based on their highway designations and so forth, and I don't know. I've never personally gone and asked them, but I suspect, on most state highways, if we wanted to reduce the speed limit in the city in a certain area, that they would be receptive to that idea, within reason. Now, if we, I don't know if from 35 to 30 is within reason in their mind, but, it would certainly be a consideration. We couldn't just go out there and change the speed limit without getting their permission, though. But we do, they have certain ranges, I guess, that they require, and as long as we operate within those ranges, they would allow it.
So with that being said, I would move that we would amend this master plan update to strike entirely on page 15 of 37, where it says road diet Main Street from 4 lanes to 3 lanes. And on page 17 of 37, the paragraph that says the posted speed limit, ... although, ... pursued to reduce it to 30 miles an hour. That those two portions be stricken entirely.
Can I address the road diet issue? Because I know that there's, again, the chances that the state might ever, or we would ever physically be able to incorporate that change from 4 into 3 are probably, there's some challenges there. But at the end of the day, a 3-lane road would definitely function better than a 4-lane road. You would eliminate those conflicts with the traffic stopping to make left turns, and you would also provide much more room for the angled parking that's downtown that right now, there's physically not enough room. Now, whether or not, the biggest challenge would be how would you transition from the 5-lane road sections to the 3-lane, but in theory, it's actually not a bad idea.
I would second Mr. Westcott's motion.
Okay, you want to restate that motion? You want to strike those?
My motion is to amend this downtown master plan update on page 15 of 37, paragraph that begins Main Street dash Boulder to Denver, road diets Main Streets from 4 lanes to 3 lanes, but that phrase right there be stricken entirely. And on page 17 of 37, in regard to the posted speed limit being reduced from 35 down to 30, that paragraph be stricken entirely.
And I second that motion.
Discussion?
And just for clarification, I second that motion because while that might happen in the future, as Ms. Jones stated, and it may or may not be a good idea, by it not being in there, it has to come back before this council before it can happen. By it being in there, it does not have to come back before the council for it to happen.
Correct.
Okay, let's vote.
Anything else? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
We better do another roll call.
Mr. Westcott?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Caruth?
Yes.
Mr. Wiley?
Yes.
Mr. Sims?
No.
Mr. George?
No.
Ms. Harris?
Yes,
Motion carries.
not a big deal.
Okay, so we've done the amendments. Now do we need to vote on the,
Motion to approve.
Second.
got a motion to approve the Downtown Master Plan updates as amended by Mr. Westcott, seconded by Mr. Tripp. Discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. New business 5, consideration of a resolution to hold a public hearing on December 21st, 2017 to vacate the north 5 feet of a 15-foot right-of-way. We're voting on vacation at this time. We're voting to hold a public hearing.
Motion.
Second.
Have a motion, Mr. Westcott, a second, Mr. Wiley. Is there discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And item 6 has been pulled from the agenda. It needs to be massaged a little bit before it gets your consideration.
Oh, okay, that's good. Motion to adjourn?
Before that second, Mayor, I'd like to clarify something with Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones, I do appreciate your efforts. I do appreciate your attention. Although we may not always agree or see eye to eye, I do appreciate your efforts and your continual work and dialogue on the city projects.
Can we get a motion to adjourn? Yes.
Yeah.